Good evening and welcome this evening to the July 25th meeting of the governing body. This evening is a special meeting. I will call it to order. Stand if you are able for the Pledge of Allegiance before we go into the meeting. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Brenda, if you will call roll, please.
Mayor Padilla.
Here.
Councilmembers Hiller.
Here.
Valdivia Acala.
Here.
Ortiz. Emerson.
Here.
Kale. Nager. Dobler.
Here.
Duncan. And Hofer.
Here.
We have 6 present with Ortiz, Kale, Nager, and Dobler absent.
Okay, we'll move on to agenda item number 2, presentations. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor and governing body. Our first presentation is going to be by Brianna Silver with Silver Consulting, and you might recognize that name because a number of months ago, the city entered into a contract with Ms. Silver to help discussing homeless strategies. And because some time has taken place between that contract and now, and because there's been changes and there's been lots of discussion about homelessness, we invited Ms. Silver to come back and have a conversation with you about what her contract means to the community and how she goes about implementing that. And she will answer questions from you after her presentation.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Welcome, Ms. Silver.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Let me share my screen. Are you all seeing the screen here?
Yes.
All right, wonderful. Well, first of all, I really appreciate having the opportunity to come and share this information with you all. From what I understand, there's many questions. And my hope and intention tonight is to really make it clear about what it is that I've been hired to do, what that process looks like, and where we are in that process, and then, of course, to answer any questions that you all may have related to that. So the first thing I want to do is just do a little bit of level setting in terms of what I have been hired as for the city. So I've been hired to be the city's innovation coach, not a consultant. And so I think it's important to just take a minute and explain what that means. So what an innovation coach does is that it's my job to facilitate and coach a team of 8 to 12 individuals using the Path to Innovation methodology to find these effective solutions to address your concerns around homelessness. I'm a process expert, I'm not a technical expert. And by nature of that, I have no preconceived notions on what your community should or should not do related to addressing its concerns around homelessness. I'm really here to help to facilitate and bring cohesion and collaboration among the technical experts that exist within your community and different people within the community, which I'll explain more in a second. What I am not hired to do in this scope of work is to create the solutions that your community pursues out of this work scope. The process itself supports your community to do that, and I'll explain how we do that together. And then lastly, a core working team, which is those 8 to 12 individuals that I mentioned above, they will lead the charge under my process guidance, but the whole community itself will contribute to and own the outcomes. And so with that, I want to go into what actually is the process that we are in contract to do together. So the process is a path to innovation. It's comprised of 3 modules of support. The first is really around understanding the problem. The second is around generating and testing new ideas. And the third is really around delivering those new ideas into your community. And so when it comes to the understand phase, the big goal of the understand phase is to really allow the space for the community to really fall in love with the problem and allow our core team to fall in love with the problem before we jump to solutions. And the reason for that is that we often find that there's a lot of assumptions for which direction things should go or they shouldn't go. Obviously every person has their own personal point of view, but that personal point of view is not necessarily encompassing the whole community point of view. And so we really take this 4 months that is the understand the problem phase, and then we initially start with just framing the problem. That is really meant to be just used as a straw man to support the right research questions to be asked of our community members that we really engage in the conducting in-depth research phase. That's where the bulk of this time is spent. Then, once we have collected all of that data, in which case in this project that would include all members of the community, from experts, people we might consider subject matter experts who are currently working with the unsheltered population, to community members who are dealing with it in their daily lives, to homeless individuals themselves, as well as, of course, the council. And then we have these in-depth research conversations. Then we bring that all together to make sense of the data and say, what have we learned? What are the key themes and insights that are emerging from this data that basically helps us to really understand the root causes and essentially gives us the solution space and the territories to start working to really meaningfully change the outcomes of what is happening in your community right now. Once we have those themes and insights, then we move to reframing the problem, which ultimately is how we collectively as a community see the problem of homelessness and ultimately where the solution pathways may exist for solving that problem in a meaningful and impactful way for your community. The second phase, generate, this is really now about now that we understand the root cause and we've fallen in love with this problem, now we're ready to really start putting solutions around the problem that will potentially get us to a much better space than where we are currently. And so that involves, first ideating with the community once again to come together and say, these are the key insights. How collectively may we solve this? That then creates a portfolio of ideas, which you gain roughly about 5 to 10. We will say these 5 to 10 ideas, if the community were to embrace them, we believe will impactfully change the situation that is happening in Topeka today. We then choose 2 of those solutions to then run prototypes and tests around. And this is yet another opportunity for the community to really be involved in that process, to really shape those ideas for maximum impact. And then once we've gone through that prototyping and testing, we go back to that initial portfolio of ideas and we say, this is what we thought made sense 3 months ago. What do we think now that we've gone through yet another layer of community engagement? Do we still, feel as relevant, and or where do we need to further push this portfolio of initiatives? And ultimately, you again continue to emerge from this work with 5 to 10 solutions that really would have a meaningful impact in the community in Topeka. And then lastly, the deliver phase. This is, it depends on what emerges in terms of what those solutions might be, as far as what the timeline might look like for delivering those solutions into the community. But the scope of work that you have with me will support roughly about 2 weeks upfront planning, and in which case, in these 2 weeks, we're looking at, all right, let's make sure that we've got the impact measurement plan really defined for 2 of the solutions. Usually they are the ones that we've done the prototyping and testing around, although they may not always be. And then we say, what does it look like to make action on this particular solution or these 2 particular solutions in the next 6 months, let's say, or the next year? We collectively have to define what is the right timeline to put behind that. But together we define that. And so I want to underscore a couple pieces of this. And that is that these solutions that get generated through this process are very much community driven. And so the yellow dots on this graph show specifically the points in time in this process that we are going out into the community in robust ways to really hear people in the community, how they understand the problem in the in-depth research. We're engaging them in actually developing the solutions as the ideate and that generate phase. And then we're engaging the community yet again to really test and refine those solutions to make sure that they are going to be the right solutions for the city of Topeka in that, test and refine phase. Additionally, I know that there's been, concern that the governing body has not seen me yet. And the reason is because there's 4 planned engagements of update with all of you throughout this process. And they come into play in the areas where there are the stars here. However, we are not yet at a star point in this diagram. And so what you can expect in terms of updates going forward is that once we have framed the problem in a way to say, this is how we're going to go into the community. These are the questions specifically that we have for the community. This is how we're going to be engaging the community, who we're going to be engaging in the community. That would be that first star. And that's done, not just as an update, but also a checkpoint to say, is there anybody that we've forgotten in this process that we really need to be involving? Is there somebody at this table who's not here, who's important to involve? And so it's an opportunity for us to collaborate. Then as we move through that understand the problem phase and we get to now we've got our reframed problem, we have our themes and insights, we collectively have a deep understanding of why the situation is as it is in Topeka and more specifically what the potential solution pathways would be. Then we come back together with all of you and we say, this is what we're understanding the current state to be. And it's an opportunity once again to either make some decisions of, we understand that there's these 5 solution pathways, but, for whatever reason, the city feels that it is, more suited to do 3 of the 5 versus, the all 5, for instance. Then at that point, we may get guidance from all of you to say, we really want you to focus on these avenues and these other 2, while they're really important, they are not necessarily within the purview of the city to do, and maybe, another member of the community or other groups in the community would be better suited for that. That's a dialogue we have at that point. When it comes then to the generate phase and that 3rd star where we've got the ideation and the test and refine, this is a moment for, all of you to be part of that prototyping process, first of all, like to really be engaged in the energy of that, but then to also just, again, as that checkpoint to say, this is how we're planning to test and refine these ideas. This is who we're inviting to that table, and these are the reasons why we're doing that. Have we forgotten anybody? Do we need to expand this in any form or fashion? And then lastly, that last star, that is really once we've now defined what we believe the implementation plan should look like, that's an opportunity to then meet again. At this stage, the team, they should know kind of what they need to be able to get to a pilot. And so that's an opportunity to share process, but then also be able to start the broader conversations of what is the next step to really making these solutions real. And so I have just a few more slides. I've gone through now, like, what is the process? What is my scope of work with all of you? I want to now just sort of do a little bit of a level set from a timeline of events to say, why is it that we haven't even really started this process yet? And so, back in February, you all approved the scope of work. At that point in time, it was situated in everything that I've just shared with you. So that 3-phase process of understanding the problem, generating and testing new ideas, and then creation of a delivery plan. In March, once that was signed, the very first task is to get a team of 8 to 12 core team members that will be working on this project with me. And so, that was something that it was going to include city staff as well as community members. And so as those discussions began, the city was struggling to figure out who should be those 8 to 12 team members, essentially. knowing that there's just so many different organizations, so many expert opinions to bring in from the community that, didn't want to leave anybody out, but also didn't want to, we can't work with a team that's huge. So we need to get to 8 to 12. That's the optimal size. And so based on sort of that struggle, there was a decision to host the Homeless Summit, which I know many of you attended. And the goal of that was really to identify where the community was gapped in existing resources. And the intention was then to say, the city itself is not going to solve this problem in and of itself. It's going to take a whole community effort. And so there's things that maybe the city is more appropriate to address, and there's things that other people are more appropriate to address. So let's just understand and get the lay of the land. That was not part of my scope of work, so hence I was not there. I did help to, have discussions about what that should be as we led up to it, and I had discussions afterwards, but I was not there as a facilitator because that's not part of the scope of work. What came out of that summit, though, as I've understood, was that, housing was noted as a gap area. And more specifically, then, the city of Topeka and the rescue mission then decided to take that trip to Colorado Springs and the Denver Rescue Mission to see how other cities have addressed housing needs of their community. And so it was after, that housing summit or the homeless summit and then this trip that then I had a conversation with City Manager Steve Wade and Kristen Moorhead, who were leading this project, and said, they were sharing what they had learned, what had come out of this, that they had given me the impression that basically the community was more aligned on housing being a gap area. And so then I suggested, and knowing that, this is a pressing concern that needs to be addressed in the community, people they want it fixed and solved as much as possible, as quick as possible. I said, one of the other ways that we have embraced this path to innovation process in the past is that we have gone and just, kind of started with the solution, but then used the test and learn phase to really validate whether that's even the right approach, as well as then to shape it for greater impact. And I said, that's another way that you could do this. And so we tossed around that. Ultimately, Steve decided that that might be something that would be worth doing, and then brought that to council from what I understand, and the decision was made to go forward with that. I then soon after that, or early May, reached out. Steve confirmed, yes, the work plan pivot, that is the direction we want to go. And so it's like, okay, great, that's what we're going to do. I reworked the proposal, same hours and scope, but just basically allocated differently, and started to plan the work according to that. And then a potential core team for the project was identified. All of those individuals were invited to a 1.5-day workshop in June. That workshop was facilitated with the anticipation that, housing needs were indeed sort of the area of focus. And what came out of that was a project focus statement, which is there. However, given all of the events that have happened in your city over the past few months, and then based on recent conversations, I've been in conversation with the new city manager, with the city attorney, and with other members of the city staff. And we've decided that we need to pivot back to the original scope of work, as I have previously just shared at the start of this presentation. And so where that leaves us is that we are right at the beginning of this process. We effectively need to reframe the problem, which we'll do differently to be respectful of the hours that you have in this scope of work. But we haven't really even gotten to the point of being able to have our first official connection with all of you in this scope of work, as well as then the community engagement that I know everyone is craving, including myself. And so what you gain from this process, just to be really clear, is you gain a portfolio of community-driven solutions for really addressing the challenge of homelessness in your community. That's going to generate 5 to 10 generally. 2 of those community-driven solutions are going to be prototyped and tested in 2 rounds with members of your community. And then you will merge with an impact measurement and next step implementation plan for 2 of those solutions in your portfolio of ideas. And then what we need still, though, in order to move forward, is a team of 8 to 12 core working group members. And this is a big commitment. We need basically each individual who stands up to be part of that needs to have a minimum of 5 hours a week to devote to this process on average over the next 8 months. And that will be, I guess, a ramped up engagement for the few occasions where I'll come in person into your community for a day and a half. And then we need people who are really willing to fall in love with the problem before committing to a solution. So that means they need to come into the conversation willing to have their assumptions debunked, open to whatever may occur. It's very much a discovery process, and it's a discovery process both about what the community needs, as well as a discovery process personally about where you stand in the issue. And so with that, that brings my formal presentation of, kind of process, where we stand, where we are in the process. And I would, invite conversation and connection and questions from all of you.
Thank you, Ms. Silver. City Manager, would you entertain questions right now?
I would say yes, Mayor and governing body.
Okay. So we've heard the presentation. I'd like to encourage the council, if they have any questions for Ms. Silver, to ask them.
That's great.
I can't see anybody online. Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry about that. Ms. Silver, thank you for that presentation. And we have now, on that chart, you showed us going back, so you would be talking to us, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and I appreciate that because I feel as the governing body, and I don't know which way you were told to focus on, but I feel that that's very important because we have heard from all of our constituents, some of us more than others, but at the end of the day, we've heard from them, and some of them longer than others, but at the end of the day, I believe that will really, really help you. My question is, who is the core team or the care team? Because at one point I seen that you said we need to have 8 to 12, and then another time you said, well, we need individuals that are dedicated 5 hours. So do you have a care team?
It's a core team. You were correct.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. And no, we do not have a core team yet. So I had a meeting yesterday with city staff and the city manager, and we have identified, city staff who could be potentially part of that team. At this point in time, the community members who would be part of that team have not yet been identified. And so that is something that is being worked on currently. But that is not something that we have at this moment. And as far as the 5 hours a week, so the core team, it is individuals. It's made up of individuals who have affiliations, right? So affiliations with the city, affiliations with different groups within your community, whether it's an established entity or a community member, that is not necessarily, that doesn't matter per se. But they are individuals who have committed to showing up every week and being engaged in the project for a minimum of 5 hours a week. So it's a pretty big lift in terms of commitment. And what that 5 hours a week involves is usually meeting with me as a whole group for about 3 hours a week. And then engaging in that community outreach that we define what that should be. And that, the amount of time with me versus the community, it changes depending upon where we are in that process. But that's what it generally looks like on a weekly basis, with the exception of the few times when I come into your community, which I think there's another like 3 times in the scope of work, and those would be a day and a half session long. So that would obviously be a much bigger commitment that week for people.
Okay, because I kind of felt like you were looking for just individuals on the core team from just the city. And this is not just a city issue. This is a county, this is a county issue. And so I wanted to make sure that everybody is brought to the table. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
No, I share that intention with you. I think it's important that it's not just city staff. I think it's important that it involves, because the reality is I don't think the solution will only require city participation to make happen. And so it's really important, put it this way, it's really important to make sure that all viewpoints are engaged. There's different levels at which those viewpoints can be filtered in. So there's the core team, which there does need to be that broader perspective that you're suggesting. And I think we're all agreed on that. I don't think that there is any difference of opinion there from the city staff that I've been working with. But then there's, these different levels of community engagement and, expert interviews and all these other areas where people who maybe they don't have the time to put towards that, nor would they necessarily be the best person to be in that core team, but their voice is really important. It needs to be included. And there's lots of space within this process to support being heard.
I agree with that. Right now, we have a lot of people that might not have the time, but will make time because of this issue. So I feel like that's important. And not knowing what you were doing, but you were here, we couldn't really reach out to our constituents or reach out to anybody to let them know what we were looking for. So as for me as a council member, I look forward to the updates and the constant communication between me and you, or I don't know how my colleagues feel, but I'm from this day forward, that's what I look for, because I haven't even spoke to you. So this is the first, and you've been here how many months? And I just have issue with that. I just have issue with that. I'm not blaming you. I'm just have issue with the process. So I hope we can go back and start all over and move forward. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Well, if I could react a little bit, because I agree. And I think that this is something that we also need to gain collective expectations around. Because when I stepped into this scope of work, the expectation was that, City Manager Steve Wade would be managing that communication. That's what I was told. And I would be part of these updates, of course. But, doing that as the coach, not necessarily as the person speaking directly. I don't necessarily, that's fine. I'm happy to do that. I think that, I had one level of expectation set with me, and I was being respectful of what that expectation setting was. And now obviously your city has gone through tremendous change in the past few months. And if those expectations need to be reset, I'm happy to do that.
I appreciate that. We have a new coach now. So being a player, I'm going to the new coach and say, how can I be a player on this team and be effective? So I will reach out to the new coach because the old coach is gone. So we have a new one, but I just want to extend my hand to you to let you know that I was not pleased with those old plays and that old coach. I'm looking forward to move forward so that we could all be a part of the team, a winning team. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Vadiviakala.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. And I want to say a few things about this because I was actually present because of the approval of the city attorney along with a community volunteer to attend the first workshop. My understanding was after that workshop, then there was supposed to be the forms were going to go out to see who was going to be on this core team. After that, because of Wade's leaving, all of this was at a standstill. This is not personal when I say this. This is coming at it from one that was involved in it. The workshop was a mess in that there was so much tension, and I was part of that tension building. Yeah, that was me. And along with other folks, there was an underlying current throughout that whole day and a half that to me feels more like what is needed is a mediator rather than a coach. Because I agree with Councilwoman Ortiz that the county needs to be a part of this. I'm willing to extend an olive branch to whoever, because this, and I'm going to go back and forth a little bit here, but what happened at the NOTO meeting, the second unsheltered meeting, was the understanding that there's all this money that's out there, and if we don't get on the same page, I'm going to start sneezing. If we don't get on the same page, it is going to be, thank you, Mayor, it's going to be a huge cluster, and we're going to waste money, and we're not going to get anywhere. So to me, this, I just want to say that it was stacked with TRM employees, and that was troublesome because there were a number of other people that were not involved. The tension was only topically addressed. A mediator is, to me, what is needed if we are first going to get the tension and get everything out on the table and then start to work collectively as a group to help Topeka, to help the unsheltered, to help the districts, to help the city as a whole. And I am extraordinarily grateful to a GTP director that was in the meeting as well that day and a half, that on the second day she said, whoa, 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 we're moving too fast. We don't even have data. One of the things that was talked about during that whole day and a half is that we don't even have enough data to start anything. And so to me, what we're looking at is that we're doing things as a council that we want to start addressing. To me, the mediation is so important to clear the air and then work on a plan after that. So I understand that I voted for this, but I cannot continue to support it. And that's just me. That's where I am right now. And I think that it's important also for folks to understand, I've been talking with a number of folks, not only in my district, across town, community leaders, and they are saying how much everything needs to slow down because they have also been hearing we do not have good data, and that there is some challenges with partnerships, and that Topeka has to be very careful with, even if we bring up this subject of a low barrier shelter again, not to be a beacon. So there are so many things that I agree with those at the NOTO meeting, and after having done much more research and having been through this day and a half workshop with you and other people, that to me what is needed and what's been talked about, what can Kansas leadership, council or committee or center, what they might be able to do. I don't know if you're a mediator or not, but until that tension gets resolved and it's real, then I don't think we're really going to get anywhere. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilman Duncan.
I'm happy to respond to that.
Please.
And I would agree with you that the tension was very high in that meeting. And unproductively high, I will say, and so I am not a mediator, but if that is something of what your community needs at this moment in time, then I respect that. One thing I will say is that, in terms of the comment of everything to, needing to slow down and no data, I hope that the timeline that I shared helped to at least share where I was getting my direction from. As I mentioned at the start, I don't have any preconceived notions of what the solution is for your community. My job is to help facilitate getting to that. And what I was given as direction is, this is where the gap is. How can we, best get there in as quick a time as possible? And so that was what I was given. I respected that, and I leaned in to work with you all as a client in support of that. Now, I think everyone can agree here tonight that maybe that was not the best decision, and we have to back up, hence, the presentation that I gave, right? But I do not disagree at all that tension is high. and it is getting higher and hotter. And so if at this moment you most need a mediator to support that, then I respect that.
Okay. Thank you. Councilman Duncan?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your presentation and being here this evening. I'll just put this out there, I guess, for public consumption. I think we've talked around it to some degree, but and you made a comment in your presentation that I don't put on you. You probably thought this happened, that there was a conversation had with us, and that's when you pivoted. To be clear, there was no conversation had with this governing body at any point about you pivoting. And again, I'm not putting that on you, but I think that's important for the public to know that that pivot happened without. In fact, most of us found out in the last few weeks and said, wait, what? What pivot? That is not what our expectation was when we voted to bring you here in the first place. So part of this conversation is us also coming to the realization of where we're at and how we work through where we are at this point. I do think that the outcomes you give us that we can get to once this process is over, that includes some 4, 5, 6 actionable focuses of areas where if we can focus on those can make a difference. I'm very positive about that. I am concerned that we've lost time with you over these last couple months because of that pivot, and that we're sort of a couple months in and basically starting over. And I don't know if that conversation needs to be had about whether we need to, how we extend that, or if that's necessary. And that's probably a conversation you can have further with the city manager as to what that looks like, its feasibility, and he can kind of let us know. I do think the lesson from this, for all of us, for you, I have no idea how many governing bodies you've had to deal with as you've done a lot of this work versus just being brought in for different agencies. I think had we had just an initial, hey, nice to meet you conversation before you started this process and you walked us through some of it, that when those pivots did happen, you would have felt more comfortable reaching out to us and saying, are you sure? Because that is not the conversation we had, when I first got here. And we would have felt more comfortable connecting with you occasionally just to make sure that we were all on the same page. So I think that's the lesson learned. The only disconnect, you got to help me here is, and we can't go back in time, we've got to come up with this core team. And I understand that part of that is on the city to identify who those players are, to help you identify who the team should be so you can do your work. But I guess the part of that process, though, is the reason we bring an outside person in is to also give us that overview perspective to say, yeah, these are the 12 people you suggest, but in doing some of my research and interaction with your community and people, I don't understand why A, B, or C is also not a part of this core team. And so I guess I was disappointed when you said you didn't participate in the summit, because that was our opportunity where we brought everybody together and you could have had a chance to see who all those players were and maybe get some of that larger perspective of who everybody was in the community. So part of my concern now is I think we can get you 12 good people or however many that is. I believe we have the ability to do that. But I guess that I'm a little concerned that maybe then we don't have that perspective from you to say, why isn't so-and-so in the room? At least ask those questions. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense and a fair point. And at the time, Steve and I had a conversation of, do we want to include this? Do we not? And it was like, well, we want to keep the scope of work at what it is. And so, that the decision was that would be done internally. And I would have some conversations to help kind of, support that from afar, but obviously not being there in person to support that. But I can understand that frustration. I share the frustration that has taken many months to get to, 12 people, and we still do not have those folks. Like you, I want to get moving on this. I want to, and I want there to be continued forward momentum if that's what you so choose.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Brianna, or Ms. Silver, whatever I should say.
Call me Brianna.
I really appreciate the presentation. It's kind of like a reset button for us. I don't think we got this much information in the first place, though, that was laid out in general. I agree with Spencer. We all agreed that this process was what was going to happen, and never were engaged in. We weren't even invited to that summit that happened, and
or later to the event in June. I'm wondering if now, with the checkpoints that you were pointing out with the stars, I don't know if that normally happens, but we all on the council do have a lot of information. And so it's a little frustrating. I don't know if any of us are prepared to be one of those 12, but certainly to have an opportunity to share what we've learned from our constituents, whether they're homeless individuals, neighbors in neighborhoods, or businesses. We're all carrying a lot of information. And I would suggest, as Councilwoman, my colleagues before, could contribute in a positive way to helping set the stage for how this is to move forward. And I don't know if you normally would take the selection or the recommendation for the 12 people to a governing body in a situation like this, but given the point that we're at, I wonder if that might not be a bad idea, no matter how much work has gone into it. And I'm sure good work will go into it, but by running it by us, would get it by the public as well. And if people had any comments about who was missing, I had an email today saying, well, what about the businesses? Were really affected? Did they even think about putting the businesses on that 12? I couldn't answer that question. Certainly, as I've watched this evolve, it seems like we really have two agendas, two tracks that we're looking at, really. One is for the homeless individuals themselves. What do they need? What are their wants and what are their needs? And how can we address those? And it seems that most people really want to do that in as respectful and complete a way and successful a way as we can. The other track is, what is this doing to the community? And what does the community want and what does the community need? And I think some of this tension and push-pull is people feeling like maybe we're spending all our time on one half of this equation. And also, it really wasn't discussed much, but just from the beginning, okay, the city, of course, needs to be involved, but not necessarily run all the community's homeless programs. And so having, again, an engagement with us maybe if needed, but clarifying where we're going with this, because we have wonderful agencies that are doing a lot of hard work and have a lot of expertise, so we don't really need to get in the way of them. But if there are some gaps, and that's, I assume, your data gathering process, again, what's really bothering people in the community, and is it legit? Do we need to fix those things? In my experience, really, no matter what the incident was, every single person I've heard from in this community has maybe been upset about trash or a dog bite or criminal activity or something, but in the same breath have said, but I want to be compassionate, I want to help people, I don't want to just throw them aside. And so I think there really is, though there was a lot of tension, there's a lot of commonality in terms of what people want, but that needing help to separate the roles and then make sure that the right people are the 12. So just kind of running through some things that have come to me. There's also been discussion that having people at the table who are currently homeless or have experienced that could be really of value. And I have no idea whether that makes sense for your core 12 or if it was even sketched out who we needed to make sure we were hearing from based on the pivot change. And so I do really support a full engagement of some sort. If us as a city coordinating that is an appropriate role, having the county help sounds great, but getting it going just so it is going. But going through this step by step as you have laid it out makes sense to me. I do appreciate the stars on your line, though, because I think especially right now, since it's kind of blown up, if you want to call it that you absolutely using those checkpoints to let us know and to check signals with us would be, I think, mutually beneficial. Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And as far as the governing body reviewing the core team, I mean, I don't see any reason why that wouldn't be a possibility, as long as the city manager would agree with that, since he is sort of running the project from your end. And so I think that that's a great idea. And as far as like, having somebody who is homeless, has experienced homeless at the table, like that is something that we've discussed. But given the fact that we've made the decision to move back to sort of the original scope of work, basically anything that was in process from a team perspective before needs to be kind of relooked at, because that previous team was chosen, and I wouldn't even say we got to the full team chosen. We sort of had like these contenders, if you will, but they were chosen based upon, my understanding at that moment in time that we were doing the pivot and that we were going to be exploring housing. And so individuals were discussed based on the expertise and knowledge that they might have. Now that we're stepping away and we're saying we have no preconceived notion that housing is what the solution should be, we do need to look broader than that now. But what is really important is that we have a team that can come together without all of that tension and can really, kind of be willing to kind of engage and think through and work together, be willing to engage in that discourse because there's going to be discourse, and just really, be in it together.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brianna. Further questions for Brianna?
No questions from me, no.
Okay. Councilman Duncan.
I do have one that I left off, and so as we look at those 12, that core team, obviously I understand the need for the city, whoever's contract, to sort of be part of that process and selection because we know our city and who those people are. But, and I didn't see any, having said that, do you have any sort of framework of suggestion? You don't have to give them now. I just meant recommendations, suggestions, what should not be included, what should be included, any sort of framework that you provide to us to guide us through that process?
Yes, I do, and it's actually specified in the statement of work itself. And so, I'm happy to resurface that. But those, they are there largely from an energetical perspective, I will say, in terms of the types of positions or postures or sort of the ways in which people orient around the world are kind of like the guidelines that are in that statement of work. But then as we started back in March identifying who potentially could be a part of that team, at that time, I had some discussions with, Steve around, okay, these are some of the other things that we should be considering as we engage in that. And so, re-engaging in that type of conversation is something that we started yesterday, with the city staff and the city manager. But that's, continuing to engage in that conversation based on tonight's decision is really the intention.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Councilman Vadiviakala.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is going to be my question then. As I stated earlier, what happened? I hear an echo. The city attorney allowed me to be in that meeting where I then went and saw what I saw and concurred with some other folks in the room. So I brought up the whole mediator thing. It doesn't sound like there's any appetite for that. So what are we really looking at here? Are we looking at keeping the consultant, and then how are we talking about, taking me out of this equation, taking people, out of District 2, maybe say, but for a business or something, out of the equation? Because the lack of trust that has been built up over the past 3.5 years as a representative for the district that is mostly impacted by this, with 90% of the encampments, probably more. So I want to know what's happening here. Is all of this hunky-dory and is no mediation needed, and, I'll be off the slate and you guys, do it however? I just want to understand.
Yeah. I don't know if city manager has anything to say, but I have some thoughts on this as well. I think for me, I really appreciate you revisiting your scope of work, Brianna, and I think that document that you can send to the rest of the governing body about those sectors of the population or the community that you feel, as a guideline at least, for those who should be part of that 8 to 12 core group, I think is important, because there's going to be a long list of people who's going to stand in line and want to be in that 8 to 12 people, and you can't put more than 8 to 12 people on it. It's not practical or manageable. But I think we have to be really intentional about who's represented in that core group. And I think it would be helpful to have that review by the city manager and the governing body, so that we're not putting ourselves in a position of, well, you know, I asked you to put me on there, but you didn't. Well, you may have asked, but there are other positions that are more important right now, and we can only have so many people. I just don't want us to get into some kind of a popularity contest. This is not what this is. This is a working group, and that has to be really stressed. That means you're in your seat, on Zoom or however it is that you conduct those meetings. But if you're going to step up, you need to be there all the time. For me, I feel that your explanation tonight a little bit about this pivot idea, I think right off the bat, for me, I heard a lot in the community about, well, why do we have to have a consultant tell us what we need to do? I think that got us off on the wrong foot to begin with. It was my hope and my understanding that contracting with you was not for you to give us any solutions. I've said that before, that I think we have all the resources here in this town already. What we needed to do is to look how we better utilize those resources and put them into a plan that's customized to our community. That's what I thought a facilitator was going to do. Help us talk out, explain what we have, what has worked in our community, and reinforce those positive things that we've been doing. I never expected, but I think the community took off with the idea that you're going to come back with a solution and we're all going to either accept it or use different parts of it or whatever. That was never my understanding of what your scope of work is. So for me anyway, I think it's important for us to make it clear that that is not your purpose and intent. Your purpose and intent, either as a mediator or a facilitator, whatever you want to label it, is for you to find those things that we have in place, make them better than we have now, or give us opportunities to make them better, coordinate and organize so that it is our product. It's the product of the community and this governing body. It's not going to be your product. You're just going to work with us to get there. And that's why I appreciate this opportunity to have that clarified, at least for me, and I think for a lot of people in the public who may have taken the label of a consultant and run with it to expect that you were going to give us a solution that we couldn't find ourselves. So I appreciate the work that you have done. It is a matter of fact that things happen in life that we have no control over. So things have happened to bring us to this point where we need a reset. And that reset, whether it puts us behind a timeline or not, needs to be done. And it needs to be done in a more inclusive way so that we can move down the road with what we want to accomplish. So I appreciate that clarification, for me anyway. Maybe others had a different idea and take on it, but I got that from the public as well when I'm out walking around and visiting with people. They keep asking, well, when's the solution coming? That's just not what my expectation ever was. Thank you. Councilman Duncan.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to speak to Councilmember Valdiviaco's question a little more directly, at least from my perspective. I think we're still on three tracks here that can all happen simultaneously. I think that she can continue to do her work that we've engaged her to do. Those 12 people are going to maybe represent a lot of folks, but they're going to be a very small core group of people, as they're calling it. I think the second piece of that is, I think we still need to bring in the mediator that we've discussed, because there are a lot more people beyond those 12 who will be engaged by that mediator in that conversation. That core group is not going to resolve some of those issues we're talking about between businesses and whatever those different groups are, that we need to open up that dialogue. I think we can do that at the same time. And I think the third piece doesn't change, and that we keep having the conversation with the public, listening to what their primary concerns are. And that doesn't preclude us from putting forth some ideas and ordinances to address those concerns. Because at the end of the day, whatever we get from this consultant is going to be, these are some great resources you have that can really work. So as you look, as we put aside whatever that number is, $1 million for next year in our budget, and then we're looking at where do we actually apply it, I think her information is going to help us say, okay, this group identified that these 4 programs make a huge difference. Maybe that's where we put the resources, or maybe it's from other conversations we had with the community about. So I view it as those 3 tracks simultaneously occurring, because I don't think they bump into each other too much. In fact, I think when we're done, they've complemented one another. So that's how I view it as you've laid it out.
Councilwoman?
Thank you, Mayor. I think with that, I would be open to that if I really felt that there was a juice on this council to do a mediator. And it's not that I don't trust my colleagues, it's just that I'm not hearing anybody talk about a mediator other than you. And I know that Councilwoman Ortiz, when she brought it up last week or the week before, I thought it was an excellent idea. So am I a little bit cynical about how that may play out? Yeah, because part of this whole thing about, and I keep going back to it, 3.5 years, it was not only challenges with the mission, it was challenges with the city. It was dragging feet through any number of city managers. It was not keeping me informed so that I could in turn tell my constituents what was going on. In some regards, there was a little bit of lip service that went on at our NIA meetings. And as much as I can tell you, this district overall is relatively united in this. To have someone be a part of it, and for me to be able to have some kind of, I'm willing to sit down and extend olive branches. Do I think it's needed? Yeah, because the mission is in my district. And we also have a county that may be giving out up to $6 million, and we all need to get on the same page. So if I could trust that a mediator may really happen, I'd be, hey, let's go, let's do it. Do the consultant, let's do the mediator, let's do the other track. But I have heard no one support that tonight other than you. That's my concern.
Councilwoman Hiller?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I think that mediator or not, along with it coming back to the council who these 8 to 12 people would be, what's been missing is what is that scope of work? What are we going to address? Not everything costs money, for instance. So I personally don't want to see it just focused on how can we spend money on this. We have policy issues that need to be addressed. I think what's important to people in the community, and if we need to go through a process first to get the scope of work done, but it's important to know that their issues, their concerns about this homeless situation that we have right now are heard and are going to be addressed by the group, not pushed aside. And so the issues of what's happening in the business districts and in neighborhoods needs to be addressed, as well as the services. And that needs to be confirmed. Hopefully Brianna has heard enough that she could sketch out not just, little circles, but identify some of, what we can make sure that is going to be addressed so that people in the community then with that listing, as well as who's on that working group, can feel somewhat assured that there is a pipeline that the particular part of this issue that they were concerned about is going to be at the table. They can be heard certain times in person because there's a big meeting that they got invited to, or other times that they know that their concerns are going to be on the table, because that fell apart when the pivot happened. So we need to all know. At least I hope that we go, what I understood, the very first vision of it was to address all aspects of the homeless issue in the community.
Councilwoman Ortiz?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Christina, I don't know if you were pointing at me, but I'll take it as a point to me, or maybe you were pointing at Spencer. I'm for the mediator, and I'll tell you why. I didn't vote for the consultant because the explanation to me was we're going to have a consultant come in, sit everybody down, talk to everybody, and see where we can connect the dots. Well, we can connect our own dots. I did finally figure out that plan that we put together was Heartland Visioning. I don't know how many of you guys remember that. We brought that back from, no, I can't remember where we brought it back from. Anyway, we hired a guy, and his name was William Batetta. And we hired him. He wasn't affiliated with the city. He wasn't affiliated with the county. And we hired him 10,000, JADO gave 10,000, city gave 10,000, and the county gave 10,000. And what he did is he came in and he talked to everybody, and he seen where, you know, he listened to everybody, and what a mediator does is he listens to the concerns, and he's nonpartisan, and then he comes up with solutions. Well, I didn't feel like a consultant was going to do that. All what I was told is that she was going to connect the dots. We know what we have here. We have a lot of good agencies here, but there's going to be people that are not going to want to sit on that core team because they're going to feel like it's city ran. There's people that are not going to want to be on it because of different people that are on it. What I would like to see is, I mean, I'm one person, but I will be voting for that. I don't know if we can break or we want to break her contract, but you know, okay, let her connect the dots and then she can tell us. I've heard that she's done this before with other cities, so okay, I'm okay with that. But what we can do with the mediator is he can give us solutions. That's what he does. He listens. He comes up with ideas and he gives us solutions. And it's somebody that's nonpartisan that everybody can sit down at the table. We've already talked about how there's so much tension there. How can we get anything done with that? Not anything to do with the consultant, but I'm just saying point blank, period. The other thing I'd like to see us do is come to an agreement where we can put money in the community trust fund. And the reason why I say that, so it's not in the city, not in the county, it's in the community trust fund, and it earns interest while it's there. You know, because all the homeless people, we have people that are on hard times and they need homes. We have people that are just traveling through, and then we have those that are mentally ill. We have so many resources, it's not even funny. But the main problem that we have here in Topeka with the county, with the local and the state is nobody is a dot connector, nobody. And I don't know, maybe the consultant will share with us where we are duplicating services, and I don't know. This is one of the things that I wanted to sit down and talk to her about if we would have had that opportunity. And another thing, I don't want, and I don't mean this badly, I don't want Vallejo in charge. I don't want Topeka Rescue Mission in charge. I want it to be a core panel that everybody can trust and that is at large in city and county, because it's all of our problem. When we get calls, we don't say, oh, this is a city, go call the county. It's all of our problem. When they're downtown and the business owners, they need to be heard. It's all of our problem. You know, we have Impact Avenue that is doing a wonderful job, but there's a little area in there that doesn't cover my kids that I wanted to get with Amanda and check that out. But they only cover if there's kids involved. If there's not kids involved, they don't help. And one of the things that Impact Avenue does is they cover them until they're 24. So they might need housing, they get them housing and jobs, and then they go back and check on them in 6 months. So they keep on until the kids are of age, and that's a good thing. But that's what I would like to see. So yes, I am for a mediator. I am, because I think a consultant does a different job, and And so I will continue to say that, even after her report comes back, because whatever 12 people we put on there, people are going to have issue with. And I understand it. We can't get a big crowd, but we sure can listen to the people, and we sure can get the right people on there. And maybe the consultant can help us do that. I don't know, but that's what I will be looking at. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Further comments? Any questions from anybody online? Seeing none, Mr. City Manager, you want to move forward?
So I think this is what I'm hearing. That we continue with Brianna, finish that workout, and somewhere along the way, we have a mediator come in and take that to another level and try and develop a consensus based upon our work with Brianna. Did I get that right? If I didn't, you need to tell me.
Councilwoman? And then-
Thank you, Mayor. For me, as the representative of District 2, that is not my understanding. That's why this feels so mixed up and garbled, kind of like where we started from square one. So I have talked with you about the mediator. I've talked with, some folks with GTP about the mediator. I've talked with a couple of folks on council about the mediator. That being because of the level of friction that is out there right now, specifically in my district, but I don't think just in my district, but and because of the level that it's gotten to after 3.5 years of trying to work this every which way that I could work it until now here we are. That tension that Brianna was talking about, it was also not just between the district I represent, the mission, there were some folks there, I'm not going to name who they were on the city that were, saying the difficulties and challenges, and there was tension. And it wasn't just between the District 2 representative and the mission. It was tension in the room. And so what I am saying is, I don't know what your all's plan is. I don't know what it is with Brianna, who's going to be part of a core group. The only reason I even considered, and I never got hold of anybody, to putting my name out there, and I'm just going to be 100% honest, because I didn't trust anybody. I did not trust anybody, and that it was going to have representation of the deep concerns in community in District 2. I didn't trust the setup when we went in there. I didn't trust the city manager at the time and what was going on and the lack of communication. And I didn't trust that as a governing body, we were at the point where we were going to move together. So when I was thinking about it, I have stuff to do. I have a lot of stuff to do. So being part of a core team was not a dream ideal for me, but the whole thing where I thought about even seeing if I could get on it was because I did not trust the way all of this would roll out. So that's where we are. And I really don't like it feeling this excruciatingly blunt and honest, but this is just where it's at right now.
Councilman Duncan?
I didn't envision it as us having to wait for a mediator. In fact, I think the longer we wait, we're not helping ourselves. I could even make a case, although I don't know that I want to, because I don't want to stop the work that Brianna is doing, that we may need a mediator as we work through who those 12 people are, to make sure that when they get in that room, there is not tension, unnecessary tension and animosity or whatever, that some of those issues have at least been worked on to some degree before they are then tasked with providing us some direction through her process. So I will make that case, whether it's to our benefit or not to make it, in terms of slowing things down, but it may not hurt it either. I mean, so I would argue that that mediation process benefits us the most right now to get us all, even if we're not going to agree in terms of organization on everything, we at least can sit in the room knowing that there's some level of trust in the conversation. And I'm not sure we're there yet. So so either way, I either envision that mediator as helping us start that selection process as we go through it, or at least being here at the same time, not waiting for this process to play out before we bring him in. That was my vision, whether that for better or worse.
Kind of in tandem in a sense. I mean, yeah. Okay. Councilman Kell.
So my thing is, well, I think the first thing we need to do is set up someone that is going to, in essence, help run this for us. Because if they're not a part of it from the beginning, it's going to be hard to now try to have someone caught up from the beginning when we start implementing these plans. It's a good person. I think maybe we have maybe a department in the city that helps deal with this, and then that's when we can look at, okay, this person needs mental health, this person needs drug and alcohol rehab, this person needs, affordable housing contacts. And so this person, or department can sit there and work our plan out that we start working with. But I believe right now we need to start putting some people in that area or designate a department for that area, because we can make all the plans we want, do all this, but if now we have to take 6 months to train people to do what our plan was, it doesn't really work. So at least one person needs to be part of that department, or that person of a designated department needs to be involved in this and then maybe be on that committee. So then this way, we're getting them going from the beginning, getting their input, letting them be the feet on the ground in Topeka as this process is going through with the consultant. And hopefully this can get us going, and instead of this, our stop and go process that it feels like we've been on, is just we start doing something and no, let's stop and let's figure everything out and then let's move on again. So my biggest recommendation right now is we need to appoint someone in the city to be the head of this department or whatever department they're in that we're going to put this into. And this person is our 100% city employee liaison that is helping us from the beginning.
Okay, thank you. I think unless there's further comment, and there might be some after I speak my piece, but I really would like to continue with the effort that has been started. I think we need to be adaptive, and the idea of a mediator has been brought forward. If we are more careful this time in getting that scope of work of the mediator, I think it can be done in tandem or at the same time so that we don't lose time and don't lose ground. I think the mediator can be a complement to what we're doing, but I don't think we trash what we've been working on and completely disregard some of the ideas, suggestions, and work. Because I also think that what we do when we do that is we don't build much trust in our partners when we ask them to come to the table, work with us, and then walk away from them because we just don't like what the end product is. Our unity of purpose has to be clear. And our purpose is to do the best we can within our capacity to give everyone an equal voice in the process so that we don't make plans for others without them being involved. I think it's important for us to show that we can work together in a way that gives everyone a voice. So for me anyway, Mr. City Manager, that's where I stand on whether or not, how we move forward. If there are no further comments, no further questions, City Manager?
Governing body have a comment before I comment.
Okay.
So I'll go apologize up front for the frustration in my voice. I think what people don't recognize, what maybe we don't put a good message out, is you have people out here working with the homeless every day, working on a level that we're not. And there are some real success stories out here, but that's just one piece of the pie, so to speak. Any one of you email us about homelessness, and Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala can probably attest to this more, along with Councilwoman Hofer and Councilwoman Hiller. Anytime you email us about a homeless or a problem, it gets responded to, whether it's the police chief, whether it's Rihanna's group, whether it's Amanda's group, whether it's me. That's our job. That's what we do. So I don't want anybody to think that we don't do anything about homeless. But what's lacking in this is a clear vision from this policy body that are the only elected officials that represent 127,000 citizens. And that's a clear public policy on homelessness. And it's not as easy as writing a strategic statement. It really means to me that you have to get into the trenches and you have to be a part of that process. That's why Amanda and I have had long discussions with Brianna about resetting this, going back. There were mistakes made, we reset it, and everybody's on the same page. It is worth it. It is worth it because the problem that faces us is not going to get any better without us, you and us, and the public coming up with solutions and strategies. And there can be a number of those. I'm not so sure that Councilman Duncan isn't right about a mediator, that this group needs a mediator. But here's what I want you to remember about mediation. In order for it to be successful, everyone has to give up something to get to the final end. So I encourage you, let's keep moving forward on this. Let's keep working on this. Let's keep devising strategies. I've had a conversation with Amanda, several conversations about maybe this is important, and I understand there is a committee, but maybe this is important enough to have a special committee of the city council, kind of being the clearinghouse, kind of working on this, developing public policies, and I think it is important. So those are my suggestions. I haven't really ferreted them out, so I would appreciate not any really deep grilling tonight, but I'm frustrated because I can't help you get beyond this point if you all don't have an agreement amongst yourselves that there are things we can do, things we can't do, and we're all in this together.
Thank you, Richard. Councilwoman Hiller.
I just appreciate everybody's comments. City Manager, I think Brett may have brought up a key piece, and that is that, and I know you're working on a number of pieces, but we need a point person on the staff that can rally around, that can hear everybody, that can, and our staff is stretched pretty hard doing a lot of innovative things and a lot of new things, and I know we're sorting out all those pieces too, but we really do need the point person on the staff. I know Councilwoman Valdivia has held off on having this be in public health and safety where it usually is, because and I agree with her, that we needed to address this issue as a council of the whole. If we can come up with the scope of what's going to be addressed so that everybody knows for sure that what they were concerned about is on the table. I think it will help. And if somehow Brianna's been caught in the middle of this to the point where we need somebody, that is her role. She's not a consultant. She's somebody who's supposed to help get everybody around the table and do the exact process we've just been talking about. But if both for the immediacy, because we need to rally right now, just get this sorted out and get on with things, and or because she got caught in the middle of this pivot, we are better off to have someone else from the staff or otherwise get this first step done so we can move on. I support it either way, but I do think we're going to all have to come together and at least frame it out so we can move steadily and forward and have that staff person, if we can find it, whoever that point person's going to be here. Thank you.
I will just tell you, we are working on that internally, and I think we'll have an answer for you in about a week.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
He mumbled that, but I think he said in about a week.
I said, we're working on it, and I'm not going to give you a deadline, but it'll be soon.
Okay.
Again, okay, well, thank you very much for the conversations and the opinions expressed. And again, thank you, Brianna, for the presentation. Nothing further on this topic. We'll move to the next agenda item, number 3, if the clerk will read.
A is a resolution introduced by interim city manager Richard Neinstead relating to the lease purchase of portable radios and accessories.
Mr. City Manager.
Oh, thank you. I almost forgot the procedure there.
That's all right.
Fire Chief Randy Phillips will discuss this with you, and this is an issue about buying new radios to replace current ones so that we are, the world of technology moves very fast, and the chief will lead you through that.
Thank you.
And Rochelle Matthews will be at the table.
You can't forget Rochelle.
Good evening, Mayor and everybody. If it's okay for a minute, I'd like to give you an overview of why this is here tonight. Kansas state statute requires that any lease agreement that we negotiate or enter into requires action, a majority vote from the governing body with a clear disclosure of the purchase price, the interest rate, and any fees or associated costs that are folded into the purchase. So what we've provided you tonight is a copy of that resolution that outlines all those items, a memo from the fire department about what the radios are for, as well as the CIP page. This first action item goes in tandem with the next one, that there is also a CIP budget amendment attached to this to account for the full cost of the lease. And with that, I'd turn it over to the fire chief for additional comment.
Chief?
Thank you. As outlined in the information that we provided to you previously, back in 2018, the city entered into a 5-year lease purchase program on our SCBAs. At that time, it was also determined by Fire Department Administration in conjunction with Finance and the City Council. It was approved in the CIP for a subsequent 5-year lease purchase program starting this year in 2023 to replace all the portable, base, and mobile radios for the fire department, which is how we've gotten to where we're at. In working with finance and with purchasing, we put together an RFP on the financing piece after we received the price quote for the new radio system. And this whole project is right in line with industry standards on the replacement of our radios at this time. They're 11 going on 12 years old. Technology changes. These radios are used, especially the portables, are used in extreme conditions on a regular basis. And we start to see increasing issues and costs with maintenance and repair. That brought us to where we're at. And so what you have before you is a replacement plan for all the radios for the fire department.
Questions for the chief? Okay. Councilman Emerson and then Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, just a couple of questions, Chief. I mean, I support this, but just had 2 questions. First of all, If these cost about $1 million, what happens to the old radios? Are those traded in or something? Or, I realize they're obviously not worth near that now, but sure they have some value, right?
So the radios that we currently have back in 2017, 2018, countywide, we moved from an analog radio emergency communication system to a digital communication system. As part of the overall countywide purchase of the entire radio system, the radios were provided to the agencies, Topeka Police Department, Topeka Fire Department, Shawnee County Sheriff. Those were purchased with county funds. So those radios revert back to the county as we replace them.
Okay, thank you for that. And just for the record, I'm fine if the county wants to buy these as well.
I would agree with that, sir.
The only other question is about the financing. I noticed, I think we're leasing them and it's like a 4.5% rate. Is that less than what we could bond this for?
That is about comparable with what we could bond. The issuance costs are a little less with the lease because it's not a public sale and there are fewer steps involved. But it's comparable, if slightly higher.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Ortiz?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Henderson Construction wants those radios so they can get 7th Street done over there, you know. Anyway, I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Okay, a motion to approve. Is there a second? Second by Councilman Duncan. If you call the roll, please.
Okay, Councilmembers Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Hofer,
Yes.
Mayor Padilla,
Yes.
Councilmembers Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Aquila,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
and Kell.
Yes.
We have 9 yes, motion carries.
Okay, motion's been carried. We move to action item 3B, which is a related item. Mr. City Manager.
B is a resolution introduced by interim city manager Richard Neinstead amending the 2024 to 2023 CIP and the 2024 to 2026 CIB regarding the acquisition of portable radios for the Topeka Fire Department, project number 801015.
So, Mayor and Governing Body, this is the second part of this. This is kind of like how Congress does things, but don't get carried away because you're better than Congress. So, you've actually authorized that. Now you need to go vote a resolution that puts it in the CIP and authorizes that acquisition and the financing of that acquisition.
Thank you. Any further questions for City Manager, for the Chief? Councilwoman Ortiz.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Councilwoman Ortiz. Second by Councilman Dobler. If you call the roll, please.
Councilmembers Duncan,
Yes.
Hofer,
Yes.
Mayor Padilla,
Yes.
Councilmembers Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Aquila,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
Kale,
Yes.
and Dobler.
Yes.
We have 9 yes, motion carries.
Motion's been carried. We move to agenda item 4, non-action items. Mr. City Manager.
A is discussion related to the City of Topeka 2024 operating budget.
Okay.
So, Mayor and Governing Body, let me kind of open this for you, that this is one of the most important policy decisions you make as a body. When you approve that budget, when you get at the end of the road, it is what you are saying are priorities for the citizens of the city of Topeka. So ask questions, ask piercing questions. If you don't feel that you understand a part or you're getting the answer that you need, it is okay to say, can you rephrase that? And you need to ask questions because yours, besides the city clerk's, are the only signatures on that state budget form is yours. Now, I would start your discussion up because there's been a lot of discussion on FTEs, and I'm going to tell you, this is just really, anyway, let me try and walk through this with you and you'll understand that. That there are currently, I believe, 150 vacant positions. Now, FTEs, and for the public, that means full-time equivalent, all right? 40-hour week, however we define that. In the 2023 budget, the count is 1,188. When you look at the 2020 budget, the FTE count was 1,194. In 2021, it decreased 1,162, and that was related to COVID-19 cuts. In 2022, apparently the city continued FTE cuts. It was down to 1,146. In the 2023 budget, there were 15 positions added. I think that those were 15 positions that were approved at budget time, right? Okay. There were also other positions added by the city manager, all right? In the 2024 budget, there's been an increase of 27 FTEs proposed. A lot of those positions are budgeted FTEs in a way. Some of them have been transferred to a different department. Some of them are filled. So finance and budget can go through that with you. The FY 2024 budget, as it's programmed now, is 6 FTEs less than the count pre-pandemic, and I'll let you sort that out. So that's where we are. That's a starting point for your discussion, and finance and budget are here to answer your questions, as are any department head that you might have a question about the budget. And I believe along the way, you will hear from the department heads who will make a short presentation to you about their budget.
Thank you, Richard. So now, Adam, is it your turn to be up?
Okay. Mr. Mayor, so just to add a little bit of context to what the city manager mentioned, the reasoning behind when we compare FTE counts for 2018 is because this was pre-pandemic levels. So at that point, we had almost 1,200 FTEs at the city. So this new proposed budget has roughly 1% less than that amount. And that is technically an increase from the previous year, but is overall, historically speaking, is still under the trend that we had for at least the past 13, 14 years. So, but the additional context is just to try to keep it at least at or near the pre-pandemic levels. But once again, we provided a sheet with every single FTE added and the reasoning behind that. So if you have any questions, I believe that every department head will be able to speak for those specific additions. Go ahead.
Thank you, Freddie. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, governing body. So as touched on last week, and as you've looked at your budget books, we focused a lot more this year on the outcomes that we are trying to provide as a city and the services broken out in the individual departments of how we are trying to accomplish those goals. And so to start off tonight's discussion, we wanted to start with the priority outcome of housing. And so I'll go through these next few slides very briefly. But when we're looking at housing, we look at 3 different metrics to kind of indicate where we are as a city and the kind of where the trends are going as far as these priority outcomes. So this first one that we look at is the number of new housing units. We have it broken out by the different types of housing units. And so you can kind of begin to see what sort of trends and where we can improve in that area. The second indicator is the point in time count. The point in time count is something that happens every year where we go out and we count those that are experiencing homelessness in our community. And so this, again, as we've touched on this evening, points to this crisis in our community. As we can see, the point in time count has increased over the last few years. And so that's something that we continue to monitor. And then lastly is properties brought back into voluntary compliance. Again, as we're looking at improving the housing stock, we look at how we can improve our different efforts through the city and see an overall better housing stock. So with that, we'll go right into the services for tonight that we're going to be presenting. The first one being homeless prevention. So I'll invite Director Rhiannon Freeman and sorry, Carrie Higgins. I get nervous up here. Sorry.
Housing Division Director.
I know her very well. Yeah, she's great. But anyways, before we would touch on that, this is the point in the budget where the $1 million allocated from the general fund is available to be allocated, again, with no purpose as of now except towards homeless prevention efforts. As we go through this presentation as well, we will call out the new FTEs. So for this particular service, there are 2 new FTEs that are proposed in the 2024 budget. So one is the Equity Access Shelter and Housing Navigator, which again, this position is not filled. It's for the 2024 budget. This position would work with EAS and other housing programs to assist individuals that need more assistance with the housing process. There's currently a gap with individuals that belong to certain community resources and maybe don't know where they need to go to understand the proper forms and the proper information to get to be involved in the different housing programs through the community. And so this position would help to fill that gap and help more individuals to be housed. And the second position is an office specialist, which again is proposed for this budget, is not filled or posted at this moment. And this would help to cover front desk responsibilities for housing services. This is something that the current office specialist also covers the Shelter Plus Care program. And it's become too much for this one person or for any one person to be able to handle. And so this would allow for more efficiency and the needed staff time to be able to dedicate towards these programs. So with that, I'll turn it over to address more.
Sure. So I will just try to kind of work my way through this slide and address some of the service overview as it relates to homeless prevention. So a lot of these programs you're familiar with, and of course, if you have questions, please ask. Carrie is much more intimately involved with these on a day-to-day basis with her staff, but Impact Avenues with helping children and families obtain affordable housing, and then the Shelter Plus Care program that we talk about frequently, ESG for rapid rehousing. And I think what I really want to do is I want to jot down to the performance measures and talk about, I think initially when we started pulling this information together, I had a question when I started looking at 2021 numbers to 2022 and then looking at our targets going forward and just understanding, the decrease. And, Carrie and Katrina have been wonderful to work with and made it very clear that the result of 2021 was a result of COVID and an increase of funding that we received. So that's why you see a decrease in the target going forward as our funds are back to where they were pre-pandemic. So therefore our households serviced will go back to that level as well because of the funding allocated. On the budget detail side, I would say for the personnel, this department has 16 individuals, 10.5 of them are grant funded, and then 5.5 of them are funded out of the general fund. And then the non-personnel side, the majority of those dollars go directly to the community, right? These are dollars that we're passing through to partner organizations through grants, that are helping serve the purpose of homeless prevention as well. Highlighting some of the goals for 2024, we talked about the EAS and Housing Navigator position. So really working to expand EAS to include that navigator. I think that what we've come to understand is that there's a certain number of people that require additional help when it comes to the follow-through support and the case management side of things, and that without having somebody there that can kind of help walk them through step by step through the process, then we lose some of those individuals along the way and we're not able to secure them with housing. So putting that navigator in place will be extremely important. And then something we're working towards every year, but have really taken a focus on, and I commend Carrie and her team for really pulling together some metrics on this, but improving our COC, our continuum of care scores. So our scores are tied directly to the funds that our community receives, which means the programs that we're able to support. And this is a long-term goal, right? I mean, these scores take a long time to improve. This application is 400 pages, probably. So it takes a long time. It's a lofty goal, but working through the homeless task force, working through community partners to understand how we can be providing better data to help increase our scores and increase our funding. And then increasing the care collaboration with Shelter Plus Care. So the care for that really meaning the support services, so the wraparound services as well. So not only matching people with shelter and a place to stay, but also making sure that they have the support to continue to better their lives going forward and that they're able to be stable in that environment. And then lastly, continue to house individuals and families with all of our programs. I think that's the overarching goal of this department and what they try to achieve on a daily basis. So continuing to keep that in focus. One of the things that's not touched on here, but I certainly think is related to homeless prevention as well, is housing, rehab, and repair. So in 2022, we kept 112 individuals in our department in their homes with our various services. So some of these are, emergency repair programs, weatherization, more than I can name. But I think that keeping individuals that are at risk or seniors aging in place in their homes as well is an extremely important part of the work that this department does as well. I or Carrie would be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Questions for Rihanna? Councilwoman Hiller.
Just one right now, and that would be, and we're in this talking about homelessness all over the place, but in the case of the navigator, you've been doing Shelter Plus Care for a while. So we've added EAS. Was the support that you're proposing this navigator provided by somebody else in the past, or was it just a gap?
It is. It would be new. So previously, Shelter Plus Care was, the referrals were brought to us from partner agencies, so they were already receiving the care piece. When we launched EAS, we moved Shelter Plus Care to a housing first model, which means individuals for Shelter Plus Care go through the EAS program, and they are not coming to us with the care piece already in place.
And so did that relieve then those agencies that were providing that before?
We still work with them, and we still work with the individuals to get them into those agencies and to get the care piece into place. It's just not already there, and it has become more difficult. We need more time with those individuals to give them those recommendations and help them through that process.
Well, I've had some people you've worked with, so I understand how hard you work and what a good job you do and how hard it is. So
thank you.
Checking. Thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
So if I may, Mr. Mayor, we'll have a hard cutoff this evening at 9 o'clock. So if I may suggest a quick 5-minute break just to stretch, and then we'll get back into it, if that's okay.
You want the 5-minute break now?
Yeah.
Okay. Any yeah, okay, it looks like the governing body's good for that too. Let's make it a 5-minute break.
Okay.
We'll recess for 5 minutes and then return for the presentation. Thank you. I didn't have. In session after a short recess. I think I left with Adam and Freddie.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the next service that we're going to touch on this evening is a new one to this year's budget book. So in Karen Black's report, she discussed the need to intervene prior to eviction. So the retaliatory eviction ordinance that was passed recently, it does not prevent eviction. It punishes, or it helps to punish after the fact. And so this is an intervention that would occur prior to the eviction happening. So part of this eviction defense, the city would find a partner outside with a nonprofit that would be able to support this service for us. The details are still being fleshed out right now, but we wanted to make sure that this placeholder was in the budget book for governing body discussion. I'll turn it over to the city attorney if I missed anything.
Yes, thank you, Adam. I would just say, when you read through Mrs. Black's report, one of the things that talks about a lot is intervening early. One of former city manager Wade's idea was this eviction defense as part of reading through that. So he had asked me 3 months ago, to see what nonprofits in our areas potentially could support that and get not formal bids, but what would this cost if you did it? Truly as a placeholder, so that if you decide this is something you want to continue and you want us to investigate further, we have the next 6 months to really flesh out how many cases a year would you want? Do you want a full-time attorney to do this work? Is it a half-time attorney as a test case? Luckily, there are other cities in our region, such as Kansas City, Missouri, and somewhere in Missouri. I think it's Casey. Sorry, I should have looked that part up. That have done this recently. So Kansas Legal Aid does have a pretty good idea of what it would cost for a community of our size. And so that $84,000 is if you wanted to do one full-time attorney, one full-time paralegal at an organization such as Legal Aid. Washburn also has other proposals they could pitch. There's other community partners. Douglas County recently, in the last couple of years, partnered with a different nonprofit to perform this kind of work. And then there's various models, right? So if you wanted to test it out for a year, it could be perhaps half that cost. So this is something for you to continue to explore. But the joys of budgeting, you're budgeting 6 months in advance for next year. So at least having it in here so that if you want to continue to flesh out this program as a service that potentially the city wants to provide, you have some idea of like the top end of what it would cost. And then you could decide based off what you felt was important or how much of that was actually needed.
Questions for city attorney? Councilwoman Valdivia Acala.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for this. I know that this is something that we had talked about, and literally in the past 3 days, I have met with folks that are so poor, that are facing eviction, retaliatory in nature, and feel like, they've called HCCI, but, they needed a quicker response, and so sent them to legal aid. And I'm just going to say, with all the work that was put in by Karen Black, the money that the city paid her, and the thoughtfulness and approach of how are we going to handle if we end up having those times where we get these onslaughts, which I think once we do a strong enough education component, I think we are, because we know we have, somewhat of a problem in Topeka. I think it can be fixed, but I think this is a wonderful idea. Test it, maybe it won't work out, but I'm very supportive of this. Thank you, Mayor.
Further comments or questions? City attorney, Councilwoman Hiller.
Just to clarify for everybody, it is, as city attorney said, it's an idea that came up with the city manager. Public Health and Safety Committee will continue to work on that and make a recommendation at some point, so.
So it's in committee right now?
Yeah, we're in the process of
Okay.
working through all those various recommendations and getting them ready to push out to you all.
Further questions? Seeing none, we'll move on.
Great. So the next service that we'll touch on is fire prevention investigations. So I'll turn over to Chief Phillips.
Thank you, and I should have done this earlier. I'll apologize for my voice. I've been a little under the weather with some sinus situation. So as part of breaking our services out this year as part of the outcome-based budgeting, we took a look at where different services that the fire department provides, which bucket that they fall under. Investigations we put into the housing outlook, and based on TFD investigations, personnel conduct cause and origin investigations for all types of fires. The efforts of the investigation units personnel help reduce the total number of fires in the community and thereby helping to maintain and or increase the housing stock. You can see on the slide the goals for fiscal year of '24 is to reduce the total number of arson fires within the city. And we recently had the retirement of our longest tenured investigator within the unit, and we'll be bringing on a new investigator within probably the next month or two, and it'll be to complete their full law enforcement certification once that individual is brought on board. And I think I'd like to take that opportunity to point out that we're able to do that with the assistance of Chief Wheelis and the police department, because we're able to put our new investigators through their police department academy at no charge to the department, and that allows us to obtain their full law enforcement certification. The unit is made up of 3 24-hour shift investigators, 1 assigned to each of our 3 shifts. That unit is overseen by the fire marshal. It is our plan to have not only the 3 investigators, but the fire marshal also full law enforcement certified with their arson investigation. We also, with the retirement of Investigator Valentine, we lost our arson canine, but we already have in place an agreement with the ATF to, we'll be having one of our other investigators will be traveling back east to Virginia this fall, and we'll be going through the training process, and we'll receive a new ATF arson canine. So we'll have that capability back in place.
That's good. Questions for the chief? Councilwoman Vadiviakula.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, I just have a question, if you could expand on it a little bit more. The goals for '24, reduce the total number of arson fires within the city. And I'm not sure what achieve clearance rate of 80%, but what is that? Is that a specific plan for that arson fire reduction?
I think it's like anything is when we see trends, trying to get in front of them. I think it's working cooperatively with other agencies like the police department. And so I can't tell you that it's a specific plan. We're always looking at ways to try and reduce those instances. But if we start to see certain patterns or maybe like an uptick in arson fires in a particular area of the city, then we'll focus our areas there.
Okay, and I know at one time when you and I first visited a long time ago, we had talked about, how wonderful it would be for TPD, TFD, code to all have that same database that could be accessed, which I would imagine would help with these, trends that you're talking about. Is that any closer to even being a possibility? That sharing of information?
Well, I would say this, is that with the relationships that have been forged between the police department and the fire department in my time as chief, I believe that we're closer now than we ever have been. Another thing we're doing in the fire department, we're currently moving from the reporting system we had been using to a new reporting system that is a product of the same company as in multiple other software systems that different city departments use, and that will allow more readily accessibility of our data by other departments. So hopefully that will help speed up that process as well.
So it would be wonderful maybe somewhere down the road to have a report, an update on that, because I'm thinking like with the VA, right? There were so many different departments and units within the Veterans Administration, but we could access, those. So, if TFD can access an address and see that it's been boarded up, for any number of reasons, or there have been squatting going on, or whatever, just that flow of information. And I'm just going to tell you that, in any way down the road if there's an increased cost with that, to get that shared data that, the departments can all access, I would support that 110%. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Further questions for the chief? Chief, I just asked one. I know it says reduce the total number of fires. Working with, I guess, code enforcement as well, that database of information where you would have the location of a lot of the unoccupied homes that are in a condition that someone might take occupancy in and start a fire. Having that data, what can you do with it in a way that you revisit those locations to keep an updated report on the condition, so that, again, in trying to reduce them, reduce the opportunity for those fires to occur in the city?
I can't sit here today and tell you that I have the magic answer for that, but I think it goes back to the increased cooperation and communication between the city departments, fire, police, code. And I think that as long as we continue to work towards that, I think we can be creative in how we can come up with some solutions. I think that not only our crews, when they're out on calls, if they see a structure that has become a safety issue, or maybe one that we weren't aware of, a lot of times what we do is we notify the dispatch center, or we notify our inspection unit, and then they will enter that address and any particular hazards that may be associated with it into the database, so that we have that information readily available if we're called out to one of those addresses in the future.
Okay, good. I like that sharing of the information, because I really think that all three services, fire, police, and code, can work together to identify those potential hazards that we have. So, good. I'm glad you're working towards that.
Thank you.
Any further questions for the chief? Councilwoman Healy.
Thank you, and thank you for that. This again has been stalled with the change in staffing and city manager, but the whole vacant property issue is on deck as a study group out of the Karen Black study for this summer. And we met with John Chardon just last week, and that very subject, one of the goals is to see if we can't come up with a single list. And John was thinking yours might be better, and that's good. And also that collaboration, I'm excited, because that whole process, it ties in with this homeless discussion we've had as well, is how can we come together efficiently and effectively to manage those properties. So should be good.
Thank you.
Thank you, chief. No further questions? Nothing online? Okay, thank you, chief.
Thank you.
All right. So our next service, if we can. Okay, so our next service, so this is one of the great things with outcome-based budgeting. One of the goals that we're trying to do is to give a little bit more insight, a little more visibility to where money is going and to what purpose. And so in this particular service, we've combined sort of the social service grants committee process with the other community grants that we award through the city's budget process. So some of those other organizations that we fund, Arts Connect, Downtown Topeka Redevelopment, as discussed in recent council meetings, the NOTO bid, Safe Streets, Kansas Children's Services, SAVE, YWCA of Northeast Kansas, and Housing and Credit Counseling. So those are just, again, usually in the budget process, you'll find those kind of within different departments. And so with outcome-based budgeting, we want to be very open about this is what we're trying to do with the grants that we're giving out in the community. These are where they're going, which isn't to say you couldn't find where they were going previously. But again, outcome-based budgeting, we just want to make it more user-friendly so that we all can go to one place to know where that's going. And with the Social Service Grants Committee, as mentioned in the last meeting, We did increase that funding so that the general fund contribution is now $425,000 opposed to about $360,000. So not included in that is the $45,000 contract that we have with the United Way to administer the social services grants. And so that brings the total for that. Are there any questions on social services and other community grants?
Any questions from the body? Councilwoman Ortiz.
I just wanted to make sure that 50,000, we just put in there, right?
Correct.
But that was for 2024, 2023 and 2024?
So two different numbers. One is for 2023. So with some general fund savings that we have this year, we were able to give an additional $45,000 to the Social Service Grants Committee. And so this proposal in the 2024 budget is upping the total pool for the social services grants by $57,000.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about you just took it off the slide. I think it was for NOTO. That's what we just put in there for NOTO. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct.
I thought it was 50,000 for 2023 and a little bit more for 2024, but is it for both years, 50,000?
I would have to follow up and check on that one.
Okay, thank you.
Adam, Safe Streets, is that housed in prevention and recovery services?
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you. Further questions?
Mayor, I have another one, I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
Communities and Schools of Mid-America, what's that for, Adam?
Which one, sorry?
Communities and Schools in Mid-America, is that for, I know it's for youth, but is that for, what exactly is it for?
I'd have to check on that one as well.
24,000.
44,000. Is this on page 34 of the budget?
Yep, accomplishments.
Okay,
And then also jobs for America's graduates.
so those are part of the Social Service Grants Committee funding.
Okay, I gotcha. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Further questions? Councilwoman Hiller.
Just so it's clear, based on the timing of when you did this book, this is actually an example. This is last year's grants, not the coming year's grants, isn't it?
That is correct.
So,
For the social service grants, correct.
right, we voted, did we already vote? To approve the recommendations from the social service grant? We didn't yet. So when that list comes through, it's going to be different than what's on this page. This is last year's.
Correct.
Okay.
Further questions for Adam? Seeing none, we'll move on.
So that concludes all of the housing services that we were going to highlight. So I do want to read the ones that we did not touch, just to see if there are any questions on those services. So again, there's 101 different services throughout the budget now that we're doing this outcome-based budgeting process. So the ones we did not touch on were fire prevention, public education, the franchise fee rebate program, the housing rehab and repair, and the land bank. So again, I want to pause to check and see if there's any questions on those 4 services.
Any questions? Persons online, anybody? Councilwoman Valdivia.
Thank you, Mayor. This is more just a comment for future, is that, we're talking about numbers and the the accurate information that we're still, needing to obtain for the amount of unsheltered, the amount of homeless that we have. And we all know that across the country, people say the point-in-time count is not really accurate. Oftentimes, people double that amount. So I think that people that are watching this meeting and reporters need to understand that is not the best marker, so that as we move forward with all of this, for next year, the year after, the better documentation that we can have won't be utilizing, or maybe have point in time count, but then, these are the more accurate numbers, because that's always going to play into how the dollars are going to be flowing. So, thank you, Mayor.
Councilwoman Hiller.
Quick one. You mentioned that there is an admin fee because we're contracting on social service grants, because we contract with United Way. We also pay an admin fee for the franchise fee services, if I'm not mistaken. And I just wanted to, this book, just a commercial timeout here, this book is incredible. And I know that it's a new approach to how to present, and I think you've done a fabulous job the first time out. So this is a question kind of in general and for consideration for the future, I guess, but it would seem that when we're paying some outside party or have an FTE designated from staff to manage a certain program like the franchise fee and social service grant, that should be reflected. So it's clear
Yeah, great.
in the future.
Yeah, point well taken. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Emerson.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I had a question on the public education of fire prevention. And I guess I'm wondering why it's so small. It says number of USD 501 schools receiving fire safety program education. There was 2 in 2021 and only 4 in 2022. And even the target of 15, I mean, why aren't all of them? I mean, I don't know how many like elementary schools there are in 501, but is there maybe 25 or something? I just wonder why they don't all get it every year.
Okay, the chief is coming back.
So the first part of your question, the reason why the numbers were so low in the last couple of previous years is that based on policies that 501 was still under for COVID protections, our personnel were not allowed into the schools to conduct the annual fire safety classes that our public education officer normally would be. That number, the goal for 24, the goal is to get back into all of them. That might have been a misprint on our part, but the goal is to get back into all of the grade schools during the course of the 24 school year, as long as that's acceptable with 501 administration.
Yeah, that sounds great, Chief. And I don't know, maybe 15 is what the number of elementary schools are. I don't know. It seems like it'd be more than that, but maybe that is. I've never counted them.
Yeah, like I said, that may have been a typo on our part when we put that together.
No, that sounds good. As long as you're basically it's trying to get to all of them, that's great. Thank you.
Further questions? Thank you, Chief. Adam?
All right, so continuing the presentation, we'll move on to our second priority outcome with growth. And so I'll turn it over to Freddie to talk through the first few slides with the measurements.
Thank you, Adam. So as the city continues to grow and as the economy grows as well, it is important for us to provide you with accurate and timely information about the conditions that are occurring in the city. So one of those indicators will be the City of Topeka population. So as you can see here, we have data up to 2021 with roughly between 125,000, pretty much right under 126,000 people living in the city. I think that one of the indicators or one of the measurements that the governing body wanted was to increase the population, increase the number of people working in the city. So as we continue with this process, I will be able to provide you with additional insight into what is happening to the current labor force. Right After that, another indicator is the size of the economy. This is the Topeka and Shawnee County total gross domestic product. For that, we're utilizing two measurements, but they roughly move almost at the same pace. So what we're looking here is the size of the Topeka economy, roughly 12.8, well, between 11.6 and 11.8 billion dollars annually. For these, in the next few months, we will probably receive the 2022 data, and I think that it's pretty likely that it will surpass the $12 billion annually. Another indicator for growth is the number of jobs and the wages for the city. So these data are showing yearly information, and at that point, we didn't have the fourth quarter of 2022. So in the last quarter of the year, 86,910 people were employed, which is roughly 300 more people than prior to the pandemic. In actuality, these 86,000 people working for the city is the highest number of people employed in the city of Topeka in at least the past 20 years that I've seen the data. And at the same time, wages are roughly, on average, 54,300, once again, as the last quarter of 2022, which, even including for inflation, is relatively high. So I think that these are the four indicators we will continue to look and provide with that information as we collect more data.
So we'll continue on with our services. So Chief Phillips will actually come back up. It's the other kind of fun part about outcome-based budgeting is some departments end up kind of doing different things, but that's kind of the purpose, to see really how our city efforts are contributing to these outcomes to move the city forward. So, Chief.
Thank you. So a number of services that the fire department provides, we felt fell under the growth category as they help to provide an overall safer community, thereby spurring growth within the city. First one you see on the slide here is ALS, or Advanced Life Support, under Emergency Medical Services. EMS is a major part of what we do within the fire department. It accounts for approximately 65% of our calls for service on an annual basis. As you can see on the slide there, over this last year, we did certify 7 additional personnel to the advanced EMT level by conducting an in-house AEMT course, which allowed us to add 1 additional fire apparatus to our ALS response level, thereby moving from 3 to 4. Goal as we move forward is to continue to increase the number of personnel we have in-house certified to either the advanced emergency medical technician level or paramedic level, thereby allowing us to increase the number of companies that can provide that level of care, with the ultimate goal being that we will be able to provide ALS care across the entire city within a time frame that meets national standards. Also on there, you will see that as part of the outcome-based budgeting and looking at the service that we provide, we came up with some new performance measures as we move forward that we believe will allow us to truly track the level and quality of care that we're providing to the community. So you'll see that there's the number of personnel to be certified to the AEMT or paramedic level, target to increase that. Total response time of less than 480 seconds to Delta and Echo ALS level calls. Those are the most severe level calls, cardiac arrests, major traumas, those types of calls. And then also, it's abbreviated here, total time to start emergency treatment from dispatch time. So what we're looking at is in code blue situations is to start tracking the total time from when our unit is dispatched to when we're either starting the administration of CPR or defibrillation, depending on what's indicated when we arrive. There are national averages and studies that, based on those numbers, we can see increases in our survivability rate when we encounter those types of patients within the community. So we felt like that was a much better performance measure as we move forward. If we move on to, the next slide, to BLS. Once again, so all personnel on the fire department are required to be trained to the basic EMT level. all fire companies, all 18 across the city, have the capability to provide basic life support, which has traditionally been our role as a basic life support first responder. We've been moving towards ALS because it provides a higher level of care and a better service to the community. Over this last year, we've placed 4 additional LifePak 15s, which are an advanced cardiac monitor in service, which allows for all 12 stations to have the capability of 12-lead EKG monitoring by TFD units. Additionally, we received 100% recertification rate for all BLS personnel with the Kansas Board of EMS. As we move into next year, we want to decrease the average response time for TFD units to emergent level BLS calls. We want to institute an enhanced quality assurance and quality improvement process to allow for more accurate tracking of acute coronary syndromes and the application of 12-lead EKGs with treatment by aspirin by TFD BLS personnel. And to start, once again, a tracking program, same as with ALS, from the start of time from when we're dispatched to the start of time of CPR or defibrillation on code blue patients.
Questions for the chief? I like the goals and response times you're looking at. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Adam?
Okay, so we'll invite Rhiannon up again. She's going to touch on building permits and plan review. And so this is another area where we'll point out a new FTE. So this new FTE is an office specialist in field services. In 2015, field services had 3 FTEs taking calls and a seasonal temp to help with licensing. That was brought down to 1 FTE and a seasonal temp. So during licensing, this can create some bottlenecks and severely restricted services to all the customers, citizens, and contractors alike. So this position has already been filled, and this new FTE is currently working in that role. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Rhiannon.
Thanks. So the building permits and plan review process is housed underneath the Development Services Department, and that division issues different permits for commercial and residential work primarily. And I think something that's really interesting to point out is the amount of coordination that goes into issuing these permits, right? There's a lot of work that's done cross-organizationally with different departments from Public Works to Utilities, making sure that all regulations are addressed before the permits are issued. Just to touch lightly on the budget details, the personnel for this, there's 19 FTEs that are in this budget as well, and then that does include the 1 office specialist position that Adam just mentioned that is currently filled. Talking a little bit about goals for 2024, one of the goals is the adoption of the 2021 International Residential Building Code. I'm sure that you'll recall that this year we actually adopted 2 new codes, the 2021 International Existing Building Code and then the International Energy Conservation Code. So definitely department has made it a priority to update some of the codes. I think in the past there's been conversation about hesitation to do that, but really understanding that we need to do that so that we're setting the standard and keeping up with surrounding communities. Second goal would be to improve our community rating system. I'll refer to that as CRS going forward, but that is really to lower insurance premiums. So the CRS membership is obtained through FEMA, and we were able to obtain that in 2023. So we'll be working to try to increase our scores. The higher we can score in that, the more discount we can provide to community members that are located with housing within a floodplain that are seeking insurance. So it's a benefit that we can pass off to others in the community. Another goal is implementing workflow in CityWorks for pre-application meetings. So right now, as it stands today, CityWorks really starts at the site plan review process. Through a lot of our Harvard Bloomberg innovation work that was done, we've talked about how we think that we're missing some opportunities of projects that may come in as leads, but don't move all the way forward to the site plan review. So we're missing that follow-up or, that extra touch that we could make to somebody at one point that maybe was interested in doing a project and the timing wasn't right because the cost of construction was too high or they weren't able to source the materials, but that doesn't mean that they couldn't be a lead in the future, somebody that we might reach out to see if they're still interested in developing to help grow Topeka. And then lastly, revising the existing land development coordinator position. So developers and consultants across the city are extremely well versed with this position because it is kind of treated as the entry point when you work with development services, right? You call into our department, and this is an individual that helps you schedule your meeting, helps point you in the right direction. I think it was originally looked at as needed to have a technical background to it, and I think what we're looking at it more as now is a navigator. So somebody that can really be a project manager that can onboard the project from the beginning and then see them through until the end. I think trying to wrap more of that customer service piece around it and really help advocate for the projects is something that we also learned during Harvard Bloomberg in our interviews with local developers and consultants alike, that they thought that extra touch would be beneficial and something that they would appreciate. Performance measures here. So these are things we're always measuring against, is the number of days to approve our commercial permits, and then also the average number of days to complete the initial review for commercial permits. We're always tracking these and working to improve. It's something that our department runs through on a weekly basis. And then lastly, it's not exactly building permits, but trade permits, inspections, and licensing. I think this is important. A big leap was made this year in launching an online portal for contractors to renew their licensing online. We talked about the new FTE, and it really is a bottleneck. All of the licensing that comes to the city of Topeka is all renewed in a short time window. So everybody that does business comes in at the same time. So launching the online portal was a goal for 2023, and now 2024, the goal will be to get as many people to adopt and utilize the online portal as possible.
Question for Rhiannon? I like the changes that you're talking about with that land development coordinator. We heard a lot of that early on about the efficiencies there and how they could speed the processes up, so
yep.
Appreciate that. Nothing for Rhiannon, we'll move on.
All right, so
I'm sorry.
I'll go ahead and ask one. On your trade permits, I recalled there being some conversation with us about the bottleneck on the permits before, and I went back and looked in the budget too about that. If they're going online, as I recall, one of the things we said is, well, why do you have them all coming at the same time then? Why don't you let people renew through the year so it's not happening all at once? You're looking for an FTE just to help get the permits filed?
So no. So this is related to, the permits are all already online. This is related to renewal of licensing. So all of the contractors that work through the city, I have to be honest in saying that I'm new enough to not understand why it happens within a 3-month window, but maybe that's something that can be improved upon. But no, this FTE is really, it fills more of a front desk position too, right? We have people that come in, it's not just licensing, but people come in to pick up their permits in person, or they just have general questions, and that's the first person that you meet. So if that person's constantly on the phone, it's a little impossible to juggle both. So we generally have a little bit of a line, and I think just trying to be able to receive people as they come in without having to have them wait. A lot of people come in during the same hours, before early, lunch, towards the end of the day. So just trying to prevent that from happening.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none, we'll move on, Adam.
all right, so the next service is land use planning. So Rhiannon?
All right. So land use planning, so now shifting from development services over to the planning department. So this division's really in charge of review of all the rezoning and subdivision plat applications that come through, assisting property owners, developers, business owners, and neighborhood groups through the facilitation of land development and zoning processes. So talking a little bit about the FTEs, there are 12 FTEs that are associated with this department. Some of the goals, so for 2024, a big goal will be to complete updates to the neighborhood health map and the neighborhood revitalization plan. That's a process that happens every 2 years. So as it exists today, it was last updated in 2022. So staff and teams already started to work on that. And then developing the historic design guidelines for the Potwin Historic District. So this is similar to design guidelines. I think really the only other area that we have design guidelines in place for is downtown currently, but something that I think would be a great fit for Potwin as well. And then completing the historic survey of African American historic resources. This was an effort that was initiated by a preservation planner that we had at one point in time. We now have somebody in that role. His name's Will Sharp. He's a great hire and super passionate about preservation planning. So he's going to jump back into that and help wrap that up so that we have that resource on hand. Also, another piece that's been top of mind for staff and certainly the Planning Commission is to complete accessory dwelling unit or ADU and other missing middle zoning code text amendments. So what this really means for growth, it's a little bit of growth and a little bit of housing, right? So this opens up a greater supply of housing options. I think when we can start thinking outside of the box around what accessory dwelling units mean, it means opening up specifically affordable housing options, right? But making sure that what we're allowing and what we're bringing online is done in a safe way that's regulated and able for people to take advantage of. And then lastly would be to complete the Historic Holiday Park Neighborhood Plan update. So that's for 2024. This year we completed the Valley Park Neighborhood Plan. So that is next on the list. Some of the performance measures here are around neighborhoods and properties surveyed or neighborhood conservation districts. So the target for this would be 150, and that's either neighborhoods or properties, so 150 being properties in this case.
Questions? Councilwoman Hiller.
Neighborhood profiles. We have discussed doing those. They were recommended in the Dreams Master package of proposals, and they are also itemized as a goal in the changing our cultural property maintenance. Where do they fit in this plan? There have been two, for people that don't know, the idea was to do profiles about the assets of neighborhoods and some of their features rather than just in addition to the health maps, which just talk about what's wrong with them and how they are at risk, both to build confidence and support within those neighborhoods, but also have something to hand out through the police department and other places besides just what's wrong. Are those in here someplace?
So completing those profiles would fall under our neighborhood planner, planning analyst. I think we probably need a little more feedback on exactly what format those take. We produced a few and didn't get too far with that. So if there's more feedback on those profiles and some direction, that would be great.
Okay, because I've seen both of those and they looked good, gave some feedback at the time, but it's just kind of, so that the capacity to get those moving is in the planner?
Yeah, I believe we could do that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Councilwoman Valdivia.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, I would like to maybe revisit it in total, because what I don't want is I don't want somebody to, I'm not saying you, somebody write it up without each council representative looking it over, because I think that it's not just in control of one person or one department. I think that, like, you know, I know you and I had some issues because you started some stuff on Oakland that wasn't appreciated. So I think that we need to re-engage, and I'd be more than glad to do, you know, District 2 and whatever meets your schedule. I will plan around it because I think that it's important. I also want to make sure that it's clearly stated here that we don't start using that and forget about the other one. That we have both. It can be an and.
Absolutely. We will definitely continue our regular neighborhood planning process, but we can also produce some other things as well.
Yeah, and I think on my end, I kind of dropped the ball on it, so apologies for that, but on board for whenever it happens. Thank you, Mayor.
Further questions? Thank you, Dan. Adam?
All right. So our next service that we'll touch on is our economic incentives and economic development. So this is where there's another 2 FTEs that we want to touch on. So the first one is an FTE that has been filled already, It's a management analyst position that provides a much-needed link between the different economic incentives and initiatives and coordinating that with planning staff and with finance staff to make sure that everything is taken care of. As you can see on the slide, we have a wide variety of different incentives and a lot of different ways that we need to go through and attract those things. That's what primarily that position takes care of. And then the Deputy Director of Economic Development position, which is currently vacant because the person is now the director. So that position, again, is to have someone within the city that can help problem solve to move strategic development projects forward, to grow the tax base, workforce, and population of the city of Topeka. So those are the two FTEs. I'll turn over to Freddie and Rhiannon to address this slide.
All right, thank you, Adam. So all these economic incentives are part of one of the tools within your toolkits to grow the economy, to increase population, to create jobs, and to increase the wages of the people in Topeka. So I will touch on these four right now. So the TIF, the tax increment financing, is a public financing tool used by local governments to support infrastructure and redevelopment projects. It works by capturing the incremental increase in property tax revenue generated by this designated tax district. So this is per economic activity. So the CID, which is the Community Improvement District, this is a special taxing district formed by a property owner also within a defined area to fund and manage various community projects. These initiatives typically focus on enhancing the area's infrastructure, safety, beautification, and overall economic development. So the primary goal for the CID is to provide a mechanism for local property owners to take an active role in improving their community by collecting funding and managing these projects that will enhance that district, that neighborhood, that area. Another one is the rule. Well, it's not anymore the rule. Is it what is it called?
The reinvestment in housing.
Reinvestment. I'm sorry, I cannot see the slides. So this one, it's a housing development incentives focused on providing affordable and suitable housing options in rural or less densely populated areas. These efforts aim to address the housing needs in rural communities, which can often face unique challenges. So this is also a pretty good project and a pretty good incentive, and we have roughly 5 in the pipeline. So we definitely have a very strong desire for developers to utilize the program. Finally, we have the Neighborhood Rehabilitation Program, and this provides tax rebates to property owners making improvement within their property. This is going to increase their appraisal value. Once again, I apologize. This one I'm probably not as comfortable speaking about. But this program it's intended to promote the rehabilitation of a city's at-risk neighborhoods, if I may. So for you want to expand on that one?
Yeah, okay. I can quickly. Yeah, so this, no, that's okay. This is totally my department. So that ties to the neighborhood health maps that we were talking about, right? So that's how we measure the health maps and measure which of our neighborhoods are considered to be intensive care or at risk, and then that applies then to the property tax reimbursement that you're able to take advantage of if you reinvest in your property and it's located within the map and falls into that area. So that's something that we encourage and that we will be certainly doing a better job to market because it impacts a lot of people and it's a great benefit and it's simple to utilize. So we should talk about it.
Want to talk about the goals or? So for these, for the economic incentive for the goals for 2024, we want to evaluate all these incentive application and to really determine what is the actual benefit for the community. I mean, within some of these, we already have in the finance policy that we have to have a pretty robust, sensitive analysis in terms of how much the city can provide incentives, so the city does not over-incentivize projects that do not need that much funding. Another goal is to create this evaluation toolkit to also increase awareness about some of these programs and incentives. We also want to collaborate with an incentive strategic task force, and this is going to be in collaboration with Topeka, the Greater Topeka Partnership, the Department of Commerce, the county, and the city. And finally, conduct a process audit to just simplify this application process. Once again, we want the city to become more development friendly. Did I miss anything, Rhiannon?
No, I think that's great.
Okay. Questions? Councilman Emerson.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I really applaud the things that planning and development are doing to increase activity and to make things more developer friendly. I guess my only question here is, there's already a process by which people have to come in. I think that I want to say a deposit, I don't know if it's $10,000 or something, if they want to do a CID or a TIF district, I believe. And I thought that we had basically outside counsel, Columbia Capital usually, that does that work. I guess, would we not be doing that anymore? I guess that's what I don't get.
You want to? Okay, I can. No, so yes, Columbia Capital, in most cases, they conduct the test. It's reviewed by the city staff. But the purpose for the test is for an outside entity to take a look at whether or not these incentive is, one, beneficial for the community, but two, is to really measure whether or not the city is over or under incentivize specific projects. So we don't want to just over incentivize economic development with the cost of additional burden for the community. So to answer the Councilman Emerson's question, we will continue to do the feasibility study and the test analysis to determine whether or not the but-for we should proceed with incentives.
Thank you for that. I guess my question though then is, what does this position do? Because I thought from your presentation what I heard, and perhaps I didn't catch it right, but I thought you were saying this person would now do all that work. Is that not the case? I guess what's the additional FTE going to do?
Yeah, so are you referring to the management analyst position? Yeah. So I think what we've learned when we've brought on the Reinvestment Housing Incentive District is that there are a lot of very detailed timelines that come in line with processes that are in place just by the way that the statute's written, right? And the ordinance that we've adopted. So what that person does is they really help us track all of the projects to make sure that the workflow is in place and that Finance has done its review on time. Legal's done their review. We have our development agreement. They're contacting the developer if we need follow-up information. These projects take quite a bit of care throughout the process. So somebody to make sure that between finance and planning that there's a connection there and that balls don't get dropped.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Yep.
So is the person already here? We already have this person?
Yes, we do have an individual on staff. Her name is Quinn Cole. She's great.
Okay. Well, that's great. That helps a lot. Thank you.
Councilman Duncan?
Thank you, Mayor. Just I guess a point of clarification. This says we have 3 TIF areas. We have way more than 3, don't we? We just did South Topeka. Does downtown not have a TIF? Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking there's one more, but maybe not. But
we have one, the old Kmart there on 29th and Fremont.
I just want to make sure we get that clarified at some point and know how many TIF we have, because I think that's important, especially as we look at if more come in front of us, the impact of that's in that map. Thank you.
Okay. Councilwoman Hiller.
Just a quick structural point. I didn't print out your presentation because I looked and I said, oh, it's the pages in the book, so I already have that. But I'm now realizing that you've substantially changed, for instance, page 84 that we're working on right now, and a couple of other ones. And so I'd appreciate a heads up on what's changed from the books that we got so that I can work off just one, maybe the rest as well.
Yes, our apologies. We'll make sure going forward.
Thank you. Thank you.
Further comments, questions? Thank you. Adam?
So that is the end of our growth services. So again, I'll read the ones that we did not cover. So if there's any questions on those, we can address those. So we have asset management and utilities, diversity, equity, and inclusion, fire operations suppression, fire prevention inspections, parking, special projects and innovation and finance, trade permits, inspections and licensing, which Brandon covered, transient guest tax, and transportation planning. So if there's any questions on any of those, we'll take those now.
Any questions? Thank you for summarizing, Adam, and making sure that if there are some that you didn't highlight this evening, that we have the opportunity to ask.
Of course.
Okay. Is that the end of the presentation for this evening?
Yes, good stopping point.
Thank you, Adam. Ready? Okay. Okay. We now move on to agenda item 5, which is public comment. If I'm correct, City Manager? Yes.
Freddie, do you anticipate between now and our next meeting date that there would be changes or updates in this budget presentation? And how are we going to get those changes and updates to the governing body?
Oh boy, here comes Adam.
Yeah, Adam, you were trying to run away, so.
My apologies.
Mike, did you hear my question?
Yeah, so after each budget session that we present, we will produce a supplement that answers all the questions that were asked, any additional questions that we receive from the body. After this meeting, we'll address those in that supplement. Any changes to the presentation as well, we'll put in the supplement. As of this point, we don't expect changes to the presentation itself.
Okay, all right. So when's our next presentation?
The next council meeting, the 8th.
On the 8th, right.
Yeah.
No meeting on the 1st, thank you. So, between now and the 8th, because nobody knows what the world's going to do in 2 weeks, much less tomorrow. If there are material changes, how do we get those out to the governing body?
We'll send an email with those changes.
All right. And we'll do it in at least 24 hours before.
Thank you. Councilman Duncan?
So I guess for you, City Manager, how do you want us to go through this process in terms of, I both don't want to jump ahead, I also don't want to have them scramble after a presentation. I mean, if there are changes that we look at now and say, I would like to see this, this, and this, or I have a recommendation here, do you want those as soon as possible, regardless of when the presentation comes? Would you rather us wait until we get to that part of the presentation?
Well, if it is a major change, if it's a material change, I'd like to know about that so we can have a discussion about that. I think the more you share up front, the more the governing body shares up front with our finance and budget department, with myself and department heads, if a change needs to be made, we can pivot a lot faster on that.
Okay, perfect. Good to know. Thank you.
Because things stay fresh when you're discussing them. Not necessarily. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I just want to make sure we're both not too far ahead of the curve, but also not here at the end of August saying, why didn't you bring this up a month ago? We could have adjusted. So
The governing body is never too far ahead of the curve.
thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to public comment. We have 5 persons signed up. Mr. William Brandlin is the first.
Good evening. No one's surprised I'm here to talk about PUD 2302. And tonight I'd just like to talk about how the Golden court case relates to PUD 2302. Back on March 20th, I asked a couple of members of the Planning Commission what they used to guide their decision-making process, and they all said Golden. I had no idea what Golden was, so we all looked it up. And there's 6 factors in Golden that governing bodies are advised to take into consideration before they vote on any rezoning. And some of the 6, Golden applies to PUD 2302, but most of them, there's no comparability or transferability between Golden and PUD 2302. The first thing that they said should be considered is, how is the neighborhood recharacterized, the existing surrounding neighborhood? Well, you all have the recharacterization chart, and it shows that there's, unlike ownership types, owners versus renters, unlike architectural types, ranch style versus whatever they're calling it. There's more traffic. If you recall, I sent you all an email about how the planning staff manipulated traffic data to give an unfair characterization of the amount of cars that were going to be added by this particular PUD. The access point for 2302 on Topeka Road there, or not Topeka Road, I'm sorry, Rochester Road. It's 1 lane each way, no turning lanes, no signals, no sidewalks. They gathered data from an area that's nearly a mile away that has 2 lanes each way, turning lanes, traffic signals, and sidewalks, and coincidentally is the access point for the Walmart parking lot on the east side and the Dillons on the west side. Well, I mean, to call that apples and oranges is understating. It's just pure statistical manipulation to achieve a desired result. Okay, another thing that the Golden case said that the governing body should consider is, what's the nearby zoning like? Well, the nearby zoning is all R1. No M2, it's all R1. I don't know if you can make a stronger case for M2 not conforming to what Golden had in mind than to say that everything around it is one thing, but this PUD is going to be something different. Okay? Another thing they said that should be concerned is the relative gain to the public. Well, the area surrounding PUD 2302, those residents are the public, and they are the ones that are the most affected. Okay? What this is going to do is it's going to bring more traffic, negative neighborhood recharacterization, and the truth is it's going to decrease the property values, and these owners are going to take it on the chin. Now, I asked around to some real estate people, and they said realistically, if this passes, 2 more minutes, please.
2 more minutes.
Please.
Move to approve. Second by Councilwoman Hofer. All in favor say aye. Aye. Two more
Thank you.
minutes, sir.
Well, the owners are going to take it on the chin. The real estate people said that we could expect a $60,000 to $90,000 decrease in the value of the property. And all the property is essentially the same. It would all sell for essentially the same price. Okay, so this is basically a 20 to a 35% property value decrease. Okay, in this PUD, the only one that benefits is the developer. And what we have here is we have a developer who bought a piece of land that was zoned R1. He knew it was R1 when he bought it, and he bought it anyway. And now, for whatever reasons, he doesn't have the ability to do single-family homes that are consistent with the character of the neighborhood. So he wants to maneuver the Planning Commission, which he's successfully done, into getting M2 zoning so he can build cheaper, less expensive housing on a piece of property that he made a bad investment on. And the reason he wants to do that, we think, is that he may not have the financial wherewithal to complete the project as R1 as it's zoned. And if we're wrong, let him prove it. But it mystifies us why the Planning Commission did not get any financial data on the developer. If you look around Topeka, it's littered with developments that were approved by the Planning Commission that are still stagnant. Now, who knows why? Maybe they had a permitting problem. I don't know. Maybe the guys just don't have the money. These are questions that should have been asked before any approvals were granted. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, Mary Peters.
Good evening. My name is Mary Peters. I'm a member of the Affordable Housing Committee of Topeka Justice, Unity, and Ministry Project, Topeka JUMP. We are here again to implore you all to move forward with the next step in utilizing the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to call together the Affordable Housing Review Committee so they can begin issuing requests for proposals to housing developers. The review committee's purpose is to ensure that affordable housing initiatives get the necessary funding and resources they need. Their expertise and oversight are vital in identifying ideal projects and implementing strategies that will make a meaningful impact on the lives of our citizens. The longer we delay the activation of this committee, the more individuals and families will find themselves on the brink of homelessness. More than 10,000 households in Topeka are living with relatives or friends, or paying more in rent than they can afford, or are living in unsafe conditions. It is your responsibility as representatives of the community to ensure that the most vulnerable among us are not left behind. If we want to ensure that the homelessness crisis does not get worse in Topeka, we need to begin utilizing every tool at our disposal, especially the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. More shelters are not enough on their own to address this crisis. What we truly need is more affordable housing. We hope that after tonight's homelessness presentation and discussion, that fact has become clearer. We again invite you all to imagine the positive ripple effects that can emanate from activating the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Families will have stable homes, allowing their children to focus on their education, and parents to concentrate on their employment. Affordable housing can result in more economic development for our city, which in turn would mean more money going back into the city to help you all further finance other crucial activities. You can demonstrate your commitment to equitable and affordable housing by activating the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and convening the review committee as soon as possible. The time for action is now. JUMP has a seat on the Affordable Housing Review Committee, and we will continue to be present at every city council meeting every week until this review committee is activated. We again recognize that the city is working to update the trust fund ordinance, but regardless, we will continue to show up until the truly important step of convening the committee is underway. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Mr. Chris Deister.
I was going over this tonight, Mr. Mayor, City Council persons, Amanda and Brenda. I want to apologize for what I wrote here because it's just too rough to even for you to consider. So I'll just read the important part of this, and I promise to do better in preparing to prepare a very readable and understandable thing. But I'll get to the basics and let you put up with me for 4 minutes here, or maybe 2 more if I can. But what I wanted to say tonight was that I observed the entire city council meeting stream last Tuesday at home, and 3 things were apparent. Number 1, each council person spoke well and sincerely with great concern for the city and county citizens and a desire to do what is good and right. Number 2, each council person expressed the difficulty of the homelessness, or what I might call coverlessness, or what's been called unsheltered dilemma here. And third, each council person expressed the fact that after all the pondering and years of adding rules to allowed homeless camping, paying police to coax people off public property, spending countless tax dollars for police, city employee cleanups, consultants, meetings of the well-intentioned, we need, we were left with is we need wisdom here, and we have no real plan. That's the consensus of what I heard, politely put, with due respect to the well-intentioned nature of our conversation. What we have done is, in the past, is, they amount to Band-Aid efforts to encourage less homelessness, but these amount to kicking the can down the road and watching the Band-Aids fail and homelessness increase, as in other states. And here, Kansas City, and I'm hearing things from Kansas City just last week, in Lawrence last week. This is getting worse and worse, but that's all I hear. So the solution, I think, is this, and this is what I carefully thought out, but which is not so well explained once again, because this was done hurriedly over the week as I had time, and anyway, so our solution begins with number 1, with a simple city ordinance that states that there is no camping by the homeless, whether one night or continued, on public or private land. Period. None. And the period is the most, whoa, 50, okay. So number 2, this is the most important thing, is we've got to have an ordinance, or we'll kick the can down the road forever and increase the problem. Camping, number 2, camping on private personal property is by owner's consent. Camping on public property, whether one night or extended, is by nightly fee, with arrangement on campgrounds designated by the state or whatever, but they still charged, and involves a bank check, cash only, or one camper per site type things with all sorts of parameters. Number 3, the emergency need will be kindly and helpfully met. That's A. B is the need mentioned. The emergency need is for food, clothing, and shelter. F, C, and S, for the night, which will be kindly and helpfully provided. May I have 2 more minutes?
Request for 2 more minutes. Moved, second. Is there a second? Second from Councilwoman Ortiz. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
B, the need is for food, clothing, and shelter for the night, which will be kindly and helpfully met. We can provide the basic emergency needs. By contrast, we cannot provide wants, as it would involve taking from citizens' funds and giving them for wants other than FCNS. Number 4, there are 3 categories of homeless people. The mentally ill homeless, who we must care for in emergency, the unfortunate homeless, which we must care for in emergency, and the decidedly homeless and transient, who are the vast majority of those that refuse offered help, damage property, who's given leeway, and the belligerent. Number 5, all homeless are obliged to submit to transport by police to designated place or be cuffed for transport in case of resistance. Number 6, addressing each category's needs. Number 1, the mentally ill will be cared for in a 3-part way. And I can draw this in the air. That is, we have 3 buildings. One is the old Topeka Rescue Mission, which I'm not defining as any authority or anything, but given that building. The second can be another building built by the city, which is for the mentally ill overnight. They are the mentally ill homeless. And the other building is for the unfortunate homeless and the designated homeless. Each one will be taken care of adequately with a certified professional in one, in a receiving place that designated by, that decides which building they'll stay in for the night. All homeless are obliged to submit to transport by police to their designated place, or they're cuffed if they're resistant. Number 6, addressing each category's needs. Mental health overnight are taken care of, and then they're all evaluated. One would be evaluated in the morning for transport to the state hospital, the mentally ill,
sir.
and the other would be asked to leave the county or city and taken there freely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks for listening very much. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Okay, next we have Bjorn Garbrick. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Is that correct, sir?
Close enough.
Okay,
Starts with a B.
starts with a B.
Just right off the bat, I'm asking for maybe 90 more seconds. I think I got this timed right, but it might
Let's
hit
go
the
ahead and
alarm.
just get started.
All right. Hello and good day, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, fur family, and everyone in between. I would like to express my gratitude for you hosting these meetings, as they play an important part in American life and society. Today, I stand before you as a recent resident and with a newly acquired criminal record. Before delving into the details, allow me to share a brief history about myself and explain why I chose Topeka for the setting of my crime spree in question. However, time restraints require me to be concise. So throughout my life, I've actively participated in community endeavors, including coaching Little League, engaging in small plays for Sunday school, dedicating my time to various charitable causes. In junior high, I served as best buddy, assisting new students in navigating the campus. Sometime after high school, I moved to Los Angeles to pursue a career in entertainment, which may have brought me into your homes through a television appearance. Until a few weeks ago, my only brush with law occurred in the 3rd grade when a teacher reprimanded me for talking out of turn. The tears rolled down my face. Then, when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, I felt compelled to relocate to a small but vibrant city. I ultimately chose Topeka. During my time here, I've been involved in renovating houses, contributing to the overall value of the city and local economy. Now, let me address the alleged crime. A crime the clerk at the prosecutor's office described as a crime like murder. However, I find this comparison to be gravely misplaced. During my almost 2 years here, my landscaper was shot in the face and was actually murdered. A few blocks away, a house blew up and I could not guess as to the reason why. I could not guess as to the reason why. Just a couple weeks ago, 4th of July weekend, I realized that the year-round fireworks in the neighborhood were actually drive-by shootings. And the Ford Field flybys are actually just drag races. On another evening, a very high individual knocked on my front door, foaming at the mouth in the middle of the night. Maybe he knew something about the house I mentioned earlier. Something more exciting than my own alleged crime, my friend, after a night of board games, was on his way to his car. He was mugged. At the time, he only had 35 cents. This infuriated the man so much that he cocked his gun and took the 35 cents. Thankfully, not my friend's life. These given instances caught me off guard to be charged with a crime like murder. I take such a comparison very seriously. Initially, I intended to pay the fine online, but the website informed me that online payment was unavailable. I assumed it was a technical glitch, but upon arriving at the court to pay in person, I was informed that the offense was considered criminal and required me to plead guilty or appear before a judge. On my day in court, I filed a motion to dismiss, highlighting the absence of both myself and the officer during the incident. Regrettably, I have not received a reply to my motion. When I approached the court clerk again seeking clarification, I was directed to the prosecutor's office. It was there I was informed that a crime like murder, referring to my case, would not be dismissed based on the absence of the officer, and they were not obligated to respond to my motion to dismiss. At this point, I realized I've neglected to mention what the actual crime is. As the judge put it, with a smirk, a dog or pig at large. Yes, that's the reason for my newly acquired criminal record. Pooch on the loose. Allegedly, while I was away, a dog went out for a sniff. No harm to anyone, except maybe myself charged with a crime. As you might guess, this situation has led me to question whether all the dogs in the shelter are exclusively associated with criminals. Here, could I get that 2 minutes? Or 90 seconds? Maybe 60 seconds.
60 seconds, is that what you want?
I think that's all I need. Because at the end of it, I'm going to give $300 away to a school or a class in Topeka.
An additional minute, is there a motion? Motion to?
So moved.
Okay.
Awesome.
Just a second.
Oh, maybe
We're
not.
running this.
Oh, yeah, you're right. You got it.
Okay. Got a motion and approval. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, one more minute.
I'm here today to implore you to reconsider the criminality of such laws and reduce them to the level of a minor infraction or at most the level of a speeding ticket. I do understand the importance of public safety and the need to protect animals. But should a lost pup truly result in a criminal record? In closing, I would like to share my heartfelt words from my nephew. His plea, a plea that encapsulates the essence of my argument, emphasizing the injustice of penalizing individuals for such minor offenses. He says, uncuff the pup. That's right, he says, uncuff the pup. So now I ask you at home, residents of Topeka, big and small, will you help uncuff the pup? Tell your friends, tell your family, go to uncuffthepup.com, yes, uncuffthepup.com, and demand, and contact your local councilperson and mayor, and demand they uncuff the pup. Additionally, to the first one of you who's able to tell your local council member which Disney Channel show I appeared in, I will donate $300 in school materials, books, or ice cream to the classroom of your choice. Or you could vote to do whatever you want with the money. Honorable council members, Mr. Mayor, thank you for your time and consideration in this matter. I do hope this is resolved in a way that works for all citizens in the city, including Billy, Molly, and their new pup, Fido. I remind you again, uncuff the pup. Thank you. I hope I made it in time.
Okay. So, Mr. Lloyd Schroeder. Lloyd Schroeder. Okay, Mr. Schroeder doesn't appear. I'm going to check here, Madam Clerk. Do we or do we not have an executive session this evening? Okay, just want to make sure. Okay. We'll move on to announcements. Madam Clerk?
So we will have no meeting next week on August 1st. It's been canceled for the elections.
Okay. City manager?
So, commissioners, you've had a long night. You've had some good discussions. We will go back, talk to the consultant, work some more for her, or work with her some more to get this discussion back on track. I like the idea of a mediator, or in some of our churches, we call them a convener, that Councilman Duncan suggested, and I may go work on that, because I think there's some things that probably ought to be meted out between the governing body, mediated out. And in the end, it's up to you if you do it or not. But I think you have to work beyond those in order to develop good policies concerning the homeless, so that you can all have a conversation where you trust what each other says. One more thing. In my news feed, that's why I brought this up, one of Topeka's own, Austin Cruz, Kruse, has been honored with a prestigious fellowship to study at a well-known school in Chicago. Now, he's a graduate from Kansas State University, and he'll be going to the law school at Northwestern University. My point in bringing that up is that is pretty prestigious, but there are youth all over this city, all walks of life, that have big achievements in life. And if you know about them, we should highlight those. We have the perfect forum here to really highlight our youth in the community and what they are doing. And it's all steps of life, all ages. So I would encourage you to, if you hear those stories in your district, share them with me, and we'll give people a little bit of spotlight, or you can give them the spotlight. But I think that's one of the ways you retain youth in a community, is you have to talk openly about how we appreciate the youth being here. And your homeless discussion has a direct bearing upon the youth in this community, because they can go anywhere. And they will go somewhere for a while, but you want them to come back. So if you come up with somebody, just let me know, and we'll figure out how to highlight that on a council agenda, and that's it.
Thank you, Richard. Appreciate it. Councilwoman Hofer?
I want to thank all of the city employees who have been helping clean up the branches and the tree debris all over town. My neighborhood is just about finished, and I've gotten a few emails, and they're very happy to have had the help with that. I know there's other neighborhoods that need more help with it, but they're putting in long hours and hot days, and I really appreciate all their efforts.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hiller?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to shout out to staff as well for the homeless camp cleanups this morning. I know we're working our way toward trying to minimize how often that happens, but they were well organized amongst the different departments. Got out there, my understanding is they largely got done by 10 o'clock this morning, so not the worst heat of the day, but that's really, it's hard work, and we'll keep working together to minimize it from here on out. Also, hats off to everyone who worked on and went to the fiesta. It was a wonderful 90th anniversary this year. Was able to get to the awards for It Takes a Village on Saturday evening. Once again, an emerging organization that's done a fabulous job and did a wonderful event recognizing the contributions internally there. And upcoming this week is the kicking off of the First for the Culture series, which also promises to be fabulous. They've got a gala on Thursday evening to start, and then events that are open to the community on Friday evening, all day Saturday, and Sunday also from 11 to 6. So people can sure watch for those. And other than that, for those who have an election, hope everybody votes on Tuesday.
Thank you. Councilwoman Valdivia.
Thank you, Mayor. First and foremost, please check on elders, check on pets, check on family members with or without air conditioning that work outside, that may be just doing mowing. The weather at the community garden on, what's today? Okay, Monday, yesterday, was just excruciating, and it is only going to be more intense this week. I think it's really sad. What we've noticed in the community garden is that, and we've noticed this last year and this year, with the spikes in temperature and high humidity, and then the intense rains that we get, you know, we're getting more funguses on the tomatoes, which have been deeply impacted this year. I, myself, and those gardeners my age and older that are out there working it, do believe that this has something to do with the shift in the climate. Very, very sad as we were all trying to hustle just to take as many of the disease and fungi leaves off of the tomato plants to save as much as we could to share in community. So, you know, this is kind of a circular conversation, but the heat, the impact that it can have on plants, on animals, on humans, please just take care. And also kudos to everyone with the Fiesta Committee, because it really was nice to have Fiesta back, having had family members in Oakland since at least 1916, and the Fiesta starting, you know, about 90 years ago. It was good to see it front and center again, to see the carnival. And a shout out to Joey Rocha and all the artists that he had for the art show, to Jamie Colon, who did the beautiful mosaic on the Our Lady of Guadalupe school, which I encourage everyone to try to take the time to go see. Seeing the dancers back, seeing everybody back in costumes, seeing the community working together brings back really strong memories of being on the Fiesta Committee, but more than that, that whole cultural component and historical component in our community of coming together to work towards a common goal. So kudos to them. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've been advised to remain silent, so I will.
Is that Tony?
Absolutely. That's a great gift for me tonight. So I don't have anything. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Councilman Kale, I saw you there.
Well, first of all, I would like to say happy birthday to myself. I turned 44 today, or as I call it, 22 times 2. I've actually had to miss the meeting because my wife had to have surgery tonight, and so before everyone freaks out, she okayed this because she knew I'd go nuts if I didn't have something to do while I waited. But she's fine and in recovery now. And I'd also like to say happy birthday to her. She'll be having a milestone birthday here between now and our next meeting. I'd like to say, thank you to everyone in the city employees that have been helping clean up all the damaged trees and things like that. Working on the homeless camps to try to help get those cleaned up. It's been a lot of work, and as it was said before, definitely check on your neighbors, check on work crews that you might have working on your property or near your property. Ask them if they want some water, Gatorade, anything like that to try to help them get through the days, because I've worked outside in this heat before, and Kansas is no joke when it's 100 degrees. So just please look out for your neighbors and your fellow people in this heat wave we're about to have. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Dobler, are you still online? Okay. Councilman Duncan
Nothing, Mayor. Thank you.
and Michelle, we took, yep, I just want to take a time to also remind people, Councilwoman Hiller beat me to it out of the rotation, but I do think that it's important for us to give some attention to this Culture Kansas Fest that's coming to Topeka. I think it's the first one in its effort, and they're starting it off right with a black tie event, but then they're making everything else accessible to the rest of the community. So take the time to participate wherever you can. Enjoy those things that are coming to Topeka that celebrate all the different populations and cultures that we have here. And next month in August, we'll have the India Fest, and that's yet another opportunity to learn more about the population that lives here in Topeka. We all bring certain gifts to this community, and we always want to be able to enjoy those gifts when we have a chance. So I appreciate everybody's conversation and discussions this evening on homelessness and the budget. And if there is no need for an executive session, if there is no further business to come before this body, I adjourn this meeting. Karen, I'm going to take you out of rotation.